Man here, Abu Kamar out in the East Coast. Shield Squad is definitely in the house. We wanted to go live a little bit earlier. Took a second. Still trying to figure all the technicalities, but here we are, and it's beautiful to be with you. It's still Friday night here in the West Coast where I am in Phoenix. I know some of y'all, it's already the next day. All right, we're going to kick this off. This is the Lashawan Qadash Total Takedown. We're going to get into that One West fake Hebrew, and we're going to show you how Aria led a lot of y'all astray. And like I said, I got my man Abu. Abu, introduce yourself, my man.
Hey, if you can hear me, this is Abu Khamer, a member of Shield Squad, and also just someone who's been interested in the subject of specifically One Westers of the vast Israelite spectrum, that One West stream. And more in particular, I've long been interested in the subject of Lashawan Qadash. They're the distinct form of Hebrew that came out of One West, that came from Aria, and which, as you're going to probably show later in this discussion, is now being used by men who consider themselves hostile to all the One West camps. Now you have these guys who are Tanakh only, and yet they're using Lashawan Qadash as well. And this, I expect to have a fun discussion on this subject. If I can, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to mi hermano Miguelito, porque ha estado esperando pacientemente para discutir este tema. Our brother, faithful to God, has wanted to discuss the subject with me for quite some time. Unfortunately, our schedules keep messing up. I got a lot of, I'm busy with family and busy with work, so our plans kept falling through, but we're going to discuss this soon. So faithful brother, if you're listening to this, we are going to discuss this soon. It just so happened by dumb luck, I was able to do this tonight real quick. My vocab called me up, and we're going to do a short version, and God willing soon. See, we're going to do it fast with, we're going to do a longer version with Faithful one day, God willing. But go ahead.
Man, are you getting any feedback, or does everything sound nice and clear?
Everything sounds nice to me.
All right, good. Abu, what is the background to this language that the One West style Hebrew Israelites use? What's the basic background that you could give people so they understand why it exists?
Well, what you'll see is when people encounter specifically the One Westers, the various splinter groups that broke off from One West, and you encounter them, they'll start talking about Hebrew, and they'll start saying that Paleo Hebrew, that ancient Hebrew, and they'll eventually get around to a dialect, a very modern dialect of Hebrew, even though they swear it's the original form of Hebrew, and they call it Lashawan Qadash. Now, that's their dialect's pronunciation of Lashon Kodesh, literally the holy tongue. It's a distinct form of Hebrew that was created by Aria, who was a high priest at the old Israelite Church of Universal Practical Knowledge, Israeli Church of Universal Practical Knowledge, back at 1 West 125th Street. And to be honest, it's essentially modern Israeli Hebrew, just with the pronunciations changed. It's very modern in its concepts of grammar and stuff like that, but it's essentially just it's been reduced to the point where all the characters in Hebrew have only one pronunciation, and it's all basically the vocalization on 21 of the 22 Hebrew characters. The only difference being with ayin, they pronounce it I, but everything else is So aleph is just beit is just ba, etc. And so down the line, and we'll see examples of that, I think, hopefully, and we're going to discuss that.
You know who invented it?
The inventor is, by the admission of even some of the old timers, like you'll hear Tahar of GMS, he'll sometimes say, without Aria, without High Priest Aria, we wouldn't have the Hebrew. And I think Johanna, the head of ISUPK, has conceded that as well. It originates with Aria. He was, as I said before, he was one of the leaders at the original school from which all these groups spring, and he created it. And then as the group splintered, they started, you have multiple groups doing it. Currently, he's still a high priest, and he also bears the title of apostle, chief high priest and apostle, I believe, at the Israelite Church of God and Jesus Christ up on 1941 Madison Avenue, which until recently was the largest Israelite group, largest One Western group anyway, although I think Nathaniel's Israel United in Christ has surpassed them now, so I don't think they're the largest group anymore. But whatever the case, that's where Aria is. He's still alive, and he's the creator of this dialect.
You know the story of how this language came to him? How the language came to Aria?
I've only heard rumors about that. I don't know. I mean, as you said, that you've heard from people about it, maybe coming from an angel or something like that. I don't know what the official narrative is, what he was telling people back in the day, but I have my own theories as to what the real origins of it, and I think we'll discuss that here. You know, when you're ready, we can get into it, because it's actually, the concept comes from rabbinic Judaism.
All right, well, that's interesting as well.
Yeah.
All right, well, let me read this passage. Let me read this passage that is proof text for doing this. Zephaniah, verse 9, says this: "For at that time I will change the speech of the peoples to a pure speech, that all of them may call upon the name of the Lord and serve him with one accord. From beyond the rivers of Cush, my worshippers, the daughter of my dispersed ones, shall bring my offering." Zechariah 3, 9, and 10. Do you have the KJV up? Because I read from the ESV. Do you want to read it in the KJV, since that's what they use?
Yeah, give me 1 second. And just it's Zephaniah 3:10. Here we go. Zephaniah 3:10.
Oh, 3, 9, and 10. 3, 9 is the main one, but
3:9.
I
I'm
also
sorry.
read 10.
Thank you. My apologies. So in the King James Bible, Zephaniah 3:9 says, "For then I will turn the people to a pure language," emphasis on pure language. And it says that they may all call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. And what the proponents of Lashawan Qadash have been saying, I guess as far back as the 80s, as at least for the last 20 plus years, as long as I've been aware of them, they'll point to that verse and say, "Did you see that? Pure language. That's Lashawan Qadash." Interestingly enough, if you get into the Hebrew of that verse, the phrase Lashawan Qadash, or in their pronunciation, Lashawan Qadash, does not appear in that verse. So the phrase Lashawan Qadash does not come from that verse, and it does not come from any other verse in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible. You won't find it anywhere. You know, this is something, like I said, that came from rabbinic Judaism, and we'll get into that. I can lay out an example whenever you're ready.
All right, one thing I want to do real quick here is try to screen share and show everybody in Hebrew. We're learning how to do some of this, so I partially just want to screen share just to kind of ensure that I can and see how. Does everybody see my screen, Zechariah 3?
Yep, I can see
you see that? All right. Now I'm going to show everybody in the Greek, or I'm sorry, the Hebrew here. So there's verse 9 right there. And then there's verse 10 right there. And to a sense, now what they would say is that the pronunciation that you would hear, for example, a modern day Hebrew speaker, whether it be Sephardic, Ashkenazi, or Israeli, whoever the person would be, they would be speaking incorrectly. And they often will call the modern pronunciation Yiddish, which is, of course, incorrect. It's not Yiddish, and say in regards to the pronunciation. So my basic understanding is what they say they do is they say they go back to Paleo Hebrew. That's in a way Hebrew before Hebrew, but I think Abu will explain it even better, that concept, and basically supply their own speculated vocalizations provided them by Aria. Since there's not the vowel markers there, recordings, it's not like we would have some kind of certain way to know what Paleo Hebrew would be, but it almost seems for certain the way Aria constructed it is wrong. And there, if you look on the screen, word for pure, and I'll show it to you in the Strongs, since I know some of y'all do that, but I'll show it to you in a more expansive lexicon, the theological word book of the Old Testament. Actually, that's something I would encourage you guys to get instead of just in Strongs. And the word there is barar, I believe, barar.
Mm-hmm.
And
in
then
the Hebrew, it's beruda. So barar is the root, and then is beruda is because for in the passive, I guess, you know, because they rendered as an adjective for the word safa. So safa beruda, you know. So, but yeah,
and there's safa. I just brought it up in the theological word book of the Old Testament there. You could see it right here, the Fa, and that's also you can see the more expanded lexicon entry. So begin, I'm going to give the proper interpretation a few times of Zephaniah 3, 9, and 10 later on as we get into this. Oh, there's a couple of things you said we'll get into later. We'll mention, like to mention first, or where would you begin? Actually, yeah, I'll let you say a little something. I'll let you kind of do some more introduction about one of those things. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the video clip that led to all this discussion in the first place. But go ahead. What should be some of the first things we should mention in regards to this?
Well, interestingly enough, since you got the Hebrew up on the screen, even that, what's in the Hebrew Safa Berura, they would pronounce it, like, for example, Berura, they would insist that that's pronounced Barawara or something like that, because everything has to have a ah sound except for the ayin. And so even here, while we're given the pronunciation of it, they would dispute the pronunciation. But as we're about to get into this video, which I'm looking forward to, and if I can give just a tiny bit of introduction to it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, as I understand it, you're about to show a Torah Nights video, correct?
Yes, I am, correct.
If so, the interesting thing about these guys is they are, of all the groups to be influenced by the various One Wester groups, they're as far away, they're the most far away. I mean, somebody like GOCC has gotten pretty far with regards to having a different name for God, slightly changing their 12 tribes chart, accepting Gentiles and using water baptism. What else is another big one? Oh, also they have a different canon of the Bible. So GOCC would generally be considered the furthest from One West doctrinally. They're all evolving, and I guess GMS has moved away from them, but not as much as GOCC. But then you have groups like the Torah Knights, who are even further removed, and they would say that they're not part of One West, and they're not part of the One West spectrum, and I'll grant them that they're not. But what happened is GMS, credit to GMS, they pioneered this whole thing about disseminating One Wester doctrine over the internet, specifically over YouTube, and I guess over other platforms as well. But GMS really pioneered pushing their doctrines over the internet. There were other people trying it, but GMS really made it explode. And as a result, people are grabbing Lashawan Qadash from all over the place, and they're not even entirely sure how to use it, how it was used at One West. So as we're going to see from this Torah Nights video, they diverge a little bit from the way it used to be taught. And you see that elsewhere. You sometimes see people on the internet, rather than saying, for Israel, the word for Israel in Lashawan Qadash is supposed to be Yasha Allah. And you'll see people saying Yasha Al or something like that. They drop that final syllable. And that doesn't necessarily happen with the Torah Nights. I'm not sure. I'm not very familiar with them. But one of the things we're going to see is they're starting to skew their understanding of how the words are pronounced. Like in some cases, they'll give two pronunciations for certain characters. And that's because they're mixing Lashawan Qadash teaching with stuff that they probably learned off the internet or something like that. But to set this up, the main thing is the Torah Knights were scandalized by the fact that Vocab rejected their version of Hebrew. He said he doesn't believe in that Hebrew, the sort of fake One Wester Hebrew, Lashawan Qadash. And so they thought they were going to teach him something. They set up this video that we're going to see a clip of, and they're supposed to teach him something and teach, I guess, the people associated with him, his friends, the Shield Squad, and so on. And say basically, try to make him make the people around him look like they don't know what they're talking about. But honestly, what they showed was very amateurish, and we're going to get into it. But I'm sorry, go ahead. I think I rambled enough.
No, that's perfect, actually. That's perfect. I'm going to set it up one more time, but I just want to show everybody. I'm going to go off this. There's the section in Zephaniah for which their fake language comes. Right there in Zephaniah 3:9, just so everybody can see it.
And I want to point out again that they'll point to that verse in the King James and say that's that Lashawan Qadash, but the phrase Lashawan Qadash or Lashawan Qadash as they pronounce it does not appear in the verse, and we're going to get into that later. That phrase does not appear anywhere in the Tanakh, but Aria got it from somewhere. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Important because and that's the reason why I showed entries and stuff. And right now you should be able to see. Here's the word pure, and then I go down here where my sort of through the ESV shows you the word. See right there, right there. That's why I wanted to show them, because anyone can see that that's not Lashawan Qadash. Speech or holy tongue, or however it's translated, and however it's translated in English. As far as how the one Westerners use it, it doesn't actually appear here in the Hebrew, and so that's ironic that their special language that they say teaches that they've sort of relearned and they're recovering. Actually, it doesn't even appear in the Bible, which is interesting, because you always hear them say, "Where's the word Trinity in the Bible?" It's not in the Bible. Well, that's not a good argument, but if we were to use that type of poor argumentation, we would say, "Where's the word Lashawan Qadash?" Not there. All right, so let me continue to set up this video clip, just like you mentioned. So I was on the Torah Nights Google Hangout, and there's some of the more foul-mouthed guys, but I find them interesting because they have these aspects of One West, even though they're going to get super mad when they say that, but in attitude and demeanor, as well as fake language, they're like One Westers, but they're not, because they reject the New Testament. They say that worshiping Jesus Christ is phallic worship, etc., etc. And he kept on saying, I need to swear that God is one, but he was saying it in the fake Hebrew tongue that they employ. Yahweh, what do you say? Yahweh Akkad, right? I was telling him, I believe in that concept, even as a Trinitarian, you know what I'm saying? But I'm not going to language to say it, and he got real mad. And then they made a video saying I denied Jesus Christ 3 times, and all this stuff was partially as a result of that. But I'm going to show you the video now where one of their members made a follow-up video. I was wrong, apparently. Part of the conversation between me and the main dude comments on it. So you're seeing his commentary on the video. I'm going to play this little clip here.
May I say one thing real quick?
Yeah, set it up. Yes, sir. Well, I set it up perfect.
When you see this table that he shows, because he's going to put up a table, and it's the same table that Tahar used back in 2007 when he tried to teach Lashawan Qadash right on 34th Street. We still got video footage of that. We won't show it tonight, but we got video footage of that. He's going to put up a table of the characters, and I want people to try to burn that into your memory, to remember the way this table looks, because it's significant. He got it from somewhere. He doesn't know where he got it from, because they've probably been passing it around for a decade now. But the source of that table, it's ironic. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Can you see the video still image there?
Yep, I can see it. I see you ready to go with the.
Right. All right. I'm going to play this, and hopefully it sounds right so everybody can hear it. All right. Here we go, everybody.
Languages speaking, but if you mean Yahweh, the God of the Hebrew scriptures, yes.
Okay, Yahweh is the name of a Judean king. Okay?
Right, but how come you didn't answer the question? Why do you say that I don't hold to the Torah? Why do you say that? I don't get it.
I said, you believe in Yahweh Akkad, and you just said, no, I don't believe in that language. Now, we are the people.
I don't believe in semantics. I don't bring your linguistic construction, but the concept of the.
Oh, I just had an error with this video here. I'm going to have to bring it up again. So, in this conversation, they kept on saying we don't believe in the Torah. And then as proof of that, he would say, the Qad, you need to swear by that. As one, like from Deuteronomy 6:4, of course, in the fake language. And I would say, well, I believe in that concept.
Speaking, but if you mean Yahweh, the God of scriptures, yes.
Okay. A Judean king. Okay?
Right, but how come you didn't answer the question? Why do you say that I don't hold to the Torah? Why do you say that? I don't get it.
I said, you believe in Yahweh Akkad, and you just said, no, I don't believe in that language.
I don't believe in semantics. I don't bring your linguistic concept of the person you're talking about. If you mean the God of the Hebrew scriptures, yes, I do serve him. But what I'm asking you is,
the videos have a little.
Those aren't even the same questions. Holding to how does that? What I'm saying is, why do you
The video's having a little bit of problem.
The Torah. Why?
All right. This is Lashawan Qadash, vocab Malone, with the short vocab. You did? And we're going to go through this alphabet first. And then we're going to show you how there's no way possible that the name can be Yahweh. All right. So let's start with the Aleph. All right. Ah. The Bet, Ba. The Gimel, Ga. The Dalet, Da. The Hey, Ha. The Wow, Wa. The Zadi, Zion, Za. Right? The Ket is Ka. The Tet, Ta. Yod is Yah. The Kaf, or the Kaf is Ka. The Lamed is La. The Mem is Ma. The Nun, Na. Then you got the Samic, right? It's Sa, right? Then you got Ayin, and it sounds like I. Then you got Pei, Pa, right? Then you got Sadi right here, the Zadi, and the Za, Za. Then you got the Kuf, and it's Ka, Resh, Ra, Shin, is Sha or Sa. Then you got the Ta, it's Tha or Ta. All right. Now that was the ancient Hebrew.
All right, I'm gonna pause it there. Sorry about some problems with the but everything ain't gonna be like that, but that part is. But Abu, just on the part we heard just there, can you comment before we maybe play some more of it?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I want to make a point about the that image he showed, that table that he showed. I got a screenshot here. I'm just going to pull it up for a second. Hold on one second. Let's see if we can see this. So I'm a little new to this as well. All right. You should be able, I assume you're able to see the image I just shared. That's a screenshot of their table.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see it.
Now, later, I mean, people can look for it on the internet. There's if you just start looking for videos on Lashawan Qadash. Now, this is a digital version. There was a hard copy version of this exact table used by GMS in 2007 when they had a big poster board that they made to teach Lashawan Qadash on 34th Street about 10 years ago. And this image has been passing around the internet, and I don't think any of these guys know. Well, some of them might know what the source of it is. And here's the ironic thing. You know, they're trying to teach us about this, but this very table was made by me. I made this in 2004 when I did an article on Lashawan Qadash for unfortunately, an atheist website way back. You know, this is before I converted to Christianity. I embraced Christianity in 2007, but or 2000, yeah, roughly 2007. But anyway, this image was created by me because back then the Phoenician script wasn't on the internet back in 2004. So I created this by hand in Paint. You know, I literally used the paintbrush tool in the Paint program to create these characters.
Really?
Yeah, and then, you know, it was on the website. It was the only thing that was available back in 2007. So some of them picked it up and started passing it around. Now, let me see if I can.
That's hilarious, man.
So, I got a clip of the article. If I could show the article real quick.
The man is using a Paleo Hebrew graphic that you created when you're critiquing the fake language. And this is the image that he picks up. So obviously,
are you able to see this?
They're not really known for noticing irony, but this is definitely something where we would say there's a lot of irony here. You know what I'm saying?
This is irony off the charts irony.
Yeah, I see it.
So this is an article that I did. Now, right there, if you should be able to see the table now. I made that way back, and the data's still on here. You can look this up. It was I wasn't the only person who wrote for this website, but go down. A bunch of people wrote for this website, and check out this date, 2004, 13 years ago.
Right.
I just wanted to point that out. Yeah, so they're trying to teach us. We're familiar with this. We've been familiar with this for over a decade, and
Right.
You know,
Well, so it's very interesting. So that's why I'm glad I could talk to you about this. And the hope would be that if you know, there's a one Wester or somebody getting influenced by their stuff, maybe they could realize that their faith in these aberrant, obscure, idiosyncratic teachings, you know, is misplaced. And one way to see that is with this idea here of you know, this Hebrew they've constructed. Maybe if they could realize that, it would be helpful. So that's why we want to do this, as well as just, you know, wanting to represent truth. Because if you believe in this fake Harlem Hebrew, then what happens is you actually are severely hamstrung when you actually come to actually studying the Hebrew scriptures, because your Hebrew is all messed up. And that's why you'll hear these guys, even though they say they're, you know, King James onlyists or whatever, you'll hear them when they get into reading parts from the Hebrew scriptures, they throw in the word Yahweh or whatever, their fake Hebrew linguistic reconstructions. So it's like they're correcting the King James translator supposedly right there as they read the English text. But yeah, so what else do you want to say about what he said in regards to that aspect, Abu?
I guess that's it for now. That's the gist of it. Oh, well, here's another thing about that. When he was going through the table, you could see where he diverged from the way Lashawan Qadash is taught. When Lashawan Qadash was created by Aria, the logic of it is that every single character has only one possible pronunciation. The funny thing is, because he's mixing that with something else he saw on the internet, he diverges from it when he says that, for example, the 21st character, the shin, we would say the shin or sin, those who know proper Hebrew, he was saying it's sha or sa. And then same thing with the last character, the tav, the tau, he was saying it's pronounced tha or ta. So he was given two pronunciations. And this is a small concession on his part, but it's relevant because he tries to use the logic of there being allegedly only one vocalization for every character against the pronunciation Yahweh. I'm not big on saying the name of the Lord, throwing it around. I think we need to treat it sacredly, but in this case, we will be discussing it. And so, yeah. But go ahead.
I had something in the background that came up. My bad. I'm still listening. Use mod in the chat. Somebody's saying that we need a moderator in the chat room. That makes me curious. Makes me want to check out what's going on in the chat room. I haven't really been able to look at it because just the two of us, and I've been kind of focusing on the technical aspects of this. But since you mentioned it, let me look. All right, let's see what's going on here. Somebody says Hebrew Israelites speak pure Hebrew. Then they put Hebrew-ish. Oh, Hebrew Israelites speak pure Hebrew-ish. You know how much they love the ish suffix. And let's see what else. Peace and blessings. Hey, what's up, Sister Cherry? Good to see you. Good to see you, Raquel. So the Shield sisters are in the house. That's good to hear. I'm glad. It's always good to see them around. Yeah, there's a So Real. Oh, So Real woke up. What's up, Lazarus? You've been resurrected. All right, nice. G-Con, he's saying share the link on your pages. Oh, we do have some question. I don't know if you want to get to it already, but ask them where the Native Americans are in their old slave pictures of Egypt are. How did the Native American tribes of Israel get straight hair when their tribe of Judah has Brillo hair? Oh, I think it's someone who doesn't agree. I've been waiting for this type of teaching. Okay, that's good. Let's see. How come they forgot Hebrew even though they and the Native Americans were all Jews? I don't even speak Hebrew, and I know that's the wrong way. Okay, yeah, so yeah, I do need a moderator in here, but I'll have to figure out how to do that because I'm still figuring out some of this. So I'll try to figure out how to make folks moderators in a second. But I'm going to try to share this again and then play some more of this man's presentation here from the Torah Nights. I'll play some of this clip. It might break up a little bit. Apparently, that's what the video wants to do. So here we continue with him talking about Lashawan Qadash.
Paleo, you know what I'm saying, alphabet. Lashawan Qadash, right? Now we're going to talk about the name Yahweh. Let's go to the Yod, right? This right here is the Yod. Say Yah. Let's go to the Y, right? Yah, Ha, Shalak, Yod, then the Hey. So it's Yah, Ha, right? Then you go to the Y. Yah, Ha, Wah. See? The Yod and the Hey together, it sounds like Wah. So when you say Yah, Ha, Wah, ain't no way you're going to get Yahweh. Because when we just read all the consonants, all the Hebrew alphabet, you see that there's no way you can get Yahweh out of this. It's Yah, Yah, Ha, Wah. All right. Now, since you don't, you know what I'm saying, want to believe us, I mean, I'm showing you this right here for reproof. You know what I'm saying? You see how you pronounce all the Hebrew consonant words. So you see there's no way that you can possibly get way out of this. So where is you getting Yahweh? Stop coming with folly and foolishness and understand that we is actually using the Hebrew ancient alphabet to pronounce the Most High name Yahweh. All right, the Lashawan Qadash. All right, now I'm gonna go to another video just to show you it's not just us who can pronounce this name. It's who put the study in, you know what I'm saying? And the Most High bless them, you know what I'm saying, and give them this name. Because when you read this Torah, you get the name. It's in the Hebrew, so you got to put in your word, right? Well, let's go to the video.
All right. So I'm still figuring out how to do all this once. I did figure out how to make people moderators, so that's good. So Real is claiming he's not Lazarus. It's all right, brother. We're just glad you resurrected. So Abu, can you comment? Explain people what he was trying to say there. Can you kind of translate what he was claiming? You know what I'm saying? Abu, are you with me? Abu, I see you, but I don't hear you. You're muted. Let me try to unmute you.
Oh, no, sorry about that. No, I was opening another window. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, yeah, so basically he was claiming that that because he went through the characters of the Phoenician script and treated them as only having one pronunciation, except for in those rare cases when he got to the end, he was trying to say that therefore a pronunciation like Yahweh is impossible. The interesting thing is he was saying, I'm going to show, it's not just us, I'm going to show you somebody else, but who he winds up going to is other one Westers. Like, for example, he goes to Aria Lob, he shows a video of I don't know if you're going to continue showing the clip, but he goes on to show a clip of Aria Lob going through Lashawan Qadash as well. And look, I don't want to say anything disrespectful to about Aria Lob, but he also does not understand the subject. And I'm not trying to disrespect him. I pray for Aria Lob. I hope he's one day liberated from that spell. I think he's an interesting cat. He's an intelligent gentleman, you know. But he's someone who's simply been under that spell a long time as well, and he's just regurgitating what was taught to him. He's not an independent source from them. I know they diverge from the other one Western groups. I'm talking about the Toranites. They diverge from them, but basically, the only reason the Toranites use Lashawan Qadash is because they inherited it off the internet from people like GMS and other groups. So they're not really going to an independent source. They're just really given their own source. And Aria Lob simply ultimately got it from someone like Aria.
Who's Aria Lob? You're mentioning somebody's name. I don't think everybody knows who he is. We've explained a little bit who Aria is in the Toranites, but who's that?
I'm pretty sure he's going to be the guy speaking. Aria Lob is the gentleman. He's the Puerto Rican gentleman he's like Tahar's right-hand man in GMS. He'll be an older guy with gray hair and a gray beard, and you'll often see him in GMS videos. Like if you got Tahar there, you'll have Gabar and you'll have Aria Lob. Aria Lob is the Puerto Rican gentleman, you know. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've seen a video where Tahar is out on the street, where he's doing street teaching and he's breaking down the alphabet as well.
And in that video, that's the one where he holds up the chart, you know, and I remember the Truth After Knowledge had a video about that, you know, about them attempting to teach it and showing the problems with it, and they never responded. It's been a decade. And I want to, if I may, I want to make a quick point about that here. I've been trying to get them to engage us on this subject for quite some time, for about a decade, and maybe more, since 2004. But now I don't often take part in these hangouts because, like I said before, my work responsibilities, family responsibilities, they make my time limited for video. But one place where we can have discussions is your, and I mean by your, I mean Vocab's Facebook group, the Hebrew Israelite Christian discussion forum. I would love to discuss it with people who are willing to discuss the subject, discuss it in a correspondence, because then we can take our time. We don't have to be on at the same time, you know, like. And so I invite anyone who wants to discuss it. I remember not too long ago, I saw a video where Sakari, or Sakari, I guess they call him, what's the gentleman's name? Azaria Bunloya. He was responding to Zion Lex. And I guess the video is about a year old now. And there's a video of him where he's saying to Zion Lex, you know, oh, if you want to discuss the Hebrew, we can discuss the Hebrew. And so I just want to say to him and anyone else interested, with respect, I'm interested. I would like to discuss it with you. Unfortunately, I'm not good with these video chats. So, you know, and if I'm not mistaken, Sakari is a member of your Facebook group. And so I would love to have a correspondence with him. I'm not calling him out. I'm not trying to disrespect him or anything like that. But I'm trying to say that, you know, for anyone who's interested, that's a great place to discuss it. We can take our time and really flesh it out. But unfortunately, I've noticed these gentlemen don't want to discuss the subject. They don't really want to discuss Lashawan Qadash. But when they're around people who don't know it, they'll throw it around like it's the true Hebrew, and anyone who doesn't know that is simply ignorant. You know, they like to use it as a stick to beat over the head people who aren't familiar with the subject. But when people who are somewhat familiar with the subject want to discuss it with them, some people familiar with Semitic languages, they don't want to discuss it. And that's at least been my experience. I'm not saying that's true of everyone I mentioned, but certainly that's been my experience over the last decade with quite a few people within the One West spectrum.
Right. So if they're going to use this and claim that everybody else's understanding of Hebrew is actually a misunderstanding, well, then they should be willing to defend that position. And we would love to have a debate along the lines of, is Lashawan Qadash accurate? Is Lashawan Qadash true biblical Hebrew? Is Lashawan Qadash correct? You know, something like that. You know, any of those.
What's the evidence for it, and what's the evidence against it? Let's discuss that. Yeah, anything like that. So we would love to see that. So if some of y'all want to step up, Abu is here, and I can be part of that discussion as well in some way. But the name of the group you mentioned there is Christian and Hebrew Israelite Gospel Discussion Group. It's got almost 26,000 members in it almost. So let's oh, someone new is joining. Let's re-explain this real quick, Abu. Somebody's asking what Lashawan Qadash actually means. Let me read the passage here, and then I'll let you re-explain it. I'm glad somebody asked, because we might be able to use this to segue into showing where the phrase actually came from. I'll show like an example of where the phrase can be found. Maybe we can segue into that. But
right, okay, that's legit, man. And here's what it says here in Zephaniah 3:9 is where they that's their proof text for using this language. But it's not correct. But let me show you the verse again. For at that time I will change the speech of the peoples to a pure speech, that all of them may call upon the name of the Lord and serve him with one accord. From beyond the rivers of Cush, my worshipers, the daughter of my dispersed ones, shall bring my offering. Now, I want to show something actually that in this little verse shows that their whole understanding of it's incorrect, which is probably no surprise. So really this part of scripture here in Zephaniah comes right after God's wrath is going to be poured out on the nations. And it's a common feature of prophecy, especially in the Hebrew scriptures, that God always has a glimmer of light amidst the dark sky that he paints for people's future when they disobey him in rebellion. And here's the glimmer of hope, which really has to do with the conversion of the nations. For at that time, so this is a different time than the judgment time, right? I will change the speech of the peoples to a pure speech. Now notice, it doesn't say I'll change the speech of Israel, does it? It doesn't say I'll change the speech of the Hebrews, does it? It doesn't say I'll change the speech of my beloved or anything like that they could. It says the speech of the peoples. Now we know what they would try to do with that because they won't properly understand it. But anyone just has to read and say, oh, it says the speech of the peoples to a pure speech, that all of them. So there's further indication explaining this is multinational, that all of them. Who's that? The peoples. So all of the peoples may call upon the name of the Lord. So historically, this is not something Gentiles have done at this point in the covenant by and large. But here it says they will call upon the name of Yahweh and serve him with one accord. Now that's interesting. Why that one accord? That has to do with the fact that then there will no longer be disunity, and fighting among them will actually be sort of side by side, shoulder by shoulder there with Israel as well as other nations. And it's interesting, of course, in the book of Acts, what does it say? And the apostles or disciples, the early Christians there, were in one accord. By the way, that's how you knew that they drove a Honda back then. They were all in one accord, right? Yeah, anyways, bad joke. There's other jokes related to that I won't get into, but check this out. This shows sort of the multinational because it has to do with the conversion of the nations. And a lot of Bibles, that'll actually be the superscript. So I'm not sort of making that up, but that's the theme of the section. Verse 10 says, from beyond the rivers of Cush, my worshipers, the daughter of my dispersed ones. So that does, this part indicates the sort of exiles returning shall bring my offering. But if you look at this whole section, it's speaking about other nations as well, which is pretty significant there. And these true worshipers come from different directions to worship the one true God. And what does Yeshua say in John chapter 4? He says, God is seeking worshipers who will worship him in spirit and in truth. It doesn't say he's seeking just the remnant of Israel. It doesn't say he's seeking people who keep the law, statutes, and commandments. And I'm not saying he's against that. That's not the point of that. But I'm saying, what is it? What's the emphasis there? Because remember, right before that, the Samaritan woman there in John chapter 4 was arguing with Christ about the place in which was proper to worship God, because they had a different place and they were wrong. That's why he says, y'all don't know what you worship. But then right after that, he says, well, God's seeking those who worship in spirit and in truth. And the funny thing is that just in this little verse that they use as a proof text refutes some of the aspects of the doctrine, specifically the one Wester type Hebrew Israelites, because they don't have a proper paradigm in which people from all nationalities will be able to call upon the name of the Lord. And so that's important for us to realize. Now, there's more I want to say about this passage. I'm going to go back to this because I want to give us the proper interpretation when we get into this, but I'm going to do it to break it up. So we're going to come back to this again because there's a lot of helpful stuff in it. But for now, Abu, I'm going to let you continue. I forget what we were saying right until I jumped into that, man. My bad.
A bunch of things. Well, one gentleman, somebody in the comment section wanted to know about that. But before we get to that, when you were talking about the Gentiles, you got me thinking about
quick,
it.
Can you stop? Are you still screen sharing? Could you stop so they can see the face again? Or is that me? I think I'm still screen sharing. Okay, never mind. I'm sorry. I'll stop. Go ahead.
I see your face, and from my end, you should just see the icon.
Bro.
All right, real quick. This is a slightly off subject, but when you mention the Gentiles, it raises an interesting subject. And actually, I want a segue within a segue, if you'll permit me to do so. I want to mention Aria, the gentleman from Saints of Thunder. He's a gentleman who I'm an admirer of. I know he doesn't agree with you gentlemen on everything, and I'm sure if him and I talked everything out, we would have disagreements as well. But nonetheless, I have respect for him because, as from all the people from the various people who go back to One West, he's one of the most original thinkers. And I mention him because someone who knows him told me a fascinating story about him. He said that years and years ago, I guess it was in the 80s or 90s, it must have been the 90s, but when everybody was back at One West, the guys were outside, and some Hell's Angel, a white cat, rolls by on a motorcycle, and he's got fringes on his leather jacket. And, some of the high priests and whatnot were wearing fringes on their leather jackets, and everybody starts making fun of the guy, right, as he drives off, saying, what does the Edomite know about fringes? What does the Edomite know about fringes? And the guy who told me this story said he was amongst those laughing, and then Adiala kind of leaned in, said to him, he says, that's probably part of his culture, too. Esau was probably wearing fringes as well. Interesting thought. I only share that just to show that, A, it's an example of how Adiala thought outside the box, and God bless him. I appreciate him. He's an interesting gentleman. And then also I mentioned that to segue into this next question, just as Adiala speculated that Esau might have worn fringes, here's a question relevant to this. What language did Esau speak according to the one Westers? You know, like if you ask them what language did Jacob speak, I'm sure they would say, well, Jacob was speaking Lashawan Qadash. Maybe a few of the savvy types might say Aramaic, but I think most of them would say Jacob was speaking Lashawan Qadash. Like if you see a quote in the Hebrew Bible quoting Jacob, it's given the language he spoke, and it's a direct quote. But then that begs the question: when Jacob was talking to Esau and Esau was talking back to him, what language were they speaking in? The assumption within their paradigm would have to be that Esau spoke Lashawan Qadash, that presumably Lot was speaking Lashawan Qadash, and I guess that would mean that the Moabites spoke Lashawan Qadash. I only mention this, I know this is a long-winded segue, but to get to this next point, they will often say, oh, you don't understand this because, you're one of the nations. The nations can't get this. But the problem is, didn't the nations, as they put it, speak Lashawan Qadash according to their own paradigm if they really followed the logic through to its own logical conclusion, their own assumptions? Like it's absurd to think, even within their paradigm, that other people won't understand Hebrew. Now, I don't believe that Lashawan Qadash is representative of true Hebrew, but the point is that their paradigm holds that all these other nations that they deal with, the Chinese, the quote-unquote white people, etc., that they all descend from Hebrew-speaking people. And so for them to say, well, you're one of the nations, not that they know anything about anybody's lineage, but if they say, oh, you're one of the nations, you're an Ishmaelite, that's what I hear all the time, that you can't possibly understand the Hebrew, but the thing is, you get the gist of it. Sorry to go off on that tangent, but now the question was, in the comment section, somebody wanted to know, what is Lashawan Qadash? It's their dialect of Hebrew amongst the various Israelite groups. There's the spectrum that we call one Westers. They're the various splinter groups that descend from the old Israeli Church of Universal Practical Knowledge that was in Harlem on 1 West 125th Street. That's why we call them one Westers. And that school created a distinct form of Hebrew. They had a high priest in there called Aria. He created his own form of Hebrew. And so ever since then, the one Westers have been using it. And in 2007, specifically GMS started spreading it on the internet. And now you have guys that are pretty far disconnected from them who just imbibed it on the internet, these DIY Israelite types. So not all Israelites use it, but amongst the various people influenced by One West, it's a distinct form of Hebrew created in the late 20th century. And they try to pass it off as ancient Hebrew. And they'll often use the Phoenician script. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, So some of the One West camps, when we say One West, we're talking about their ideological descendants. So they no longer have that address. In fact, that address is an abandoned Applebee's. But that's a way to describe them because at one time in the 80s and 90s and 70s, actually, going back, they were a unified school, right? And so we use One West because they actually use that designation for themselves, at least some of them. And so it's a way to describe them with this place name, and it identifies certain aspects of their theology that are different than other Hebrew Israelite groups. So within that, this language is a distinctive. For example, if you run into most Tanakh-only Hebrew Israelites, like, say, Zion Lex, he might engage in Gematria, but he won't engage in this Harlem Hebrew. And if you think that's a disrespectful name to call it Harlem Hebrew, because, that's where Aria came up with it, I got one worse for you. Nate, who's the leader of the biggest current Hebrew Israelite One West camp called Israel United in Christ. If you notice, it's Israel United in Christ. So they don't employ Lashawan Qadash there because they use Christ, which is a translation into English from the Greek. So they are okay using that IUIC. They've kind of got away from it, and you don't hear IUIC utilizing that much. Those are guys in purple and gold, if you don't know what I'm talking about. And he actually has called it Hebonics. So that's like, dude, I didn't say that. He said that. Calling it Harlem Hebrew, I don't think is as bad, really. But you want to a little bit on?
Yeah, I'll say this about Nathaniel Alaga, or now he's called Nathaniel. But that's also interesting. When he was at One West, he was known as Nathaniel Alaga. Nathaniel Allah is the Lashawan Qadash version of Nathaniel, and then God just means he was like the third one in the school to have that name. So Nathaniel Alaga. The fact that he dropped Nathaniel Alaga and changed his name back to Nathaniel is the first hint. However, they haven't gotten away from it fully. You still see that some of their members have Lashawan Qadash names and others don't. They're sort of there's an apathy about it, or maybe an ambivalence is the way to put it. But yeah, as far back as when Barak Shah was still with him, I remember him and Barak Shah used to be out in Crown Heights, and they would call it not Hebonics, they would say that Ebonics Hebrew. They would disdainfully refer to Lashawan Qadash as that Ebonics Hebrew, because they knew that it was made up by Aria. And the more distance you put between yourself and Aria, the less confidence you should have in Lashawan Qadash. Because the thing is, really, the whole thing originally was accepted on his authority. You know, he made these claims, they just accepted it. And it was purely on his authority because A, they believed he was a prophet, and B, you know, back in those days, you couldn't really question what he said when you were in the school. If you said something like, if you tried to challenge him, you might get put out the school. So they were forced to accept it. And so Nathaniel, as he's gotten further and further away from Aria, he's tacitly acknowledged in certain points that Aria was teaching falsehood in various ways. As a result, that undermines trust in Aria, and that undermines trust in Lashawan Qadash. And so, you know, it's interesting that you see IUIC as a group that's getting further and further away from it. They've almost fully shaken it off. They still hang on a little bit because the other groups challenge them on the name. But yeah, they lost a lot of it. By the way, I think you're muted now.
Yeah, I was, but because I was talking to someone on Periscope. I'm trying something different, man, where I've got Instagram up, I've got Periscope up, I got Facebook Live. Well, I had that up, but I took that down, and then I got the Google Hangout. I'm trying to get everybody to come on the Google Hangout through the other means, and so I was talking to someone through the other side just so they can hear. So if you're listening to me right now on Periscope or Instagram, go on my YouTube page. Just go youtube.com, vocab Malone, all one word, whatever it is, and you can find there, and that way you can hear the other side, because I'm talking to Abu Kamar, a fellow Shield Squad member right now, about a false religious practice, which is basically a group that's made up their own language. And so we're speaking on that right now, and I'm sort of reintroducing the topic to y'all, but you can hear more, and you can even see images if you go in the YouTube way and just look for the title of Lashawan Qadash Takedown, right? All right, now someone just asked if they invented their own language. Well, they sort of have. They've modified real Hebrew, and they put their own vowels in there. So, Abu, let me try to explain this, because I feel like there's a lot of technicalities, and I know we got a lot to cover. I want you to pick up where you were, or I'm going to play this video, but I want to re-explain something in layman's language, and you be more precise where I get it less precise. Okay, here we go. The oldest Hebrew, I guess you could call Paleo Hebrew, but there's not like a strong manuscript tradition of that. Most of our manuscripts are from the Masoretic text, which by that time, the Hebrew doesn't just have the consonants only, but it also has the vowels by the way of vowel pointers. Because way back in the day, when they would read the Hebrew from, say, a Torah scroll, the reader knew what to say, and they would actually provide their own vowels. So the reader mentally provided and then vocally provided what's called the vocalization, and there were no vowel pointers. All they saw were the consonants. And if you think that sounds crazy, have you ever seen on the internet, sometimes they'll take out all the vowels a lot of times, and they'll have like some letter, and they'll be like, can you read this? The human mind's amazing, or something like that. And most of the time, because you know the language, you can provide almost all the vowels within the context as you read it. Now, this gets into part of the issue that sparked this whole discussion off. When I was on the Torah Nights Google Hangout show kind of debating them, they kept on trying to force me to speak their fake language and swear by that, saying Yahweh is a God. And I told them I agreed with the concept, but not their fake linguistic construction. And they became very offended that, made some videos about it, which that's what we're responding to right now. But with Yahweh, the Israelites were extremely worried about taking the Lord's name in vain. And so a lot of times you'll see just what's called the tetragrammaton. There will just be the vowel, there'll be the word Yahweh with only the Hebrew characters and not the vowels, okay? And so there's sort of some debate and speculation about then what would be the proper vowels to put into place to get God's name right, because they were worried they were going to violate taking the Lord's name in vain. And so that's why a lot of times you'll see even sometimes modern day Jews on the internet might write God and they'll write G-D, for example. So I'm just trying to give some context so you can understand how this all came about and to understand. So modern Hebrew has the vowel pointers. The Masoretes provided what was already there because people started to not know the proper vocalizations anymore. So that's where the dots and all these little vowel pointers came about. And our current manuscripts have those. And what the Hebrew Israelite said is, hey, those are wrong. Those have been influenced by pagan thought and this and that. And so here's the real version. And there's different versions about how Aria, who was the leader at the school at this time, came up with. But basically what they've done is, this is the English equivalent, have made all the vowels A's, or what is it, I's and E's, right? There occasionally you'll see that, but that's why when you hear it, it sounds sometimes, and I'm not trying to be funny, a little bit like maybe baby talk, because it's got so many of the ah sounds. So for example, G-Con, what's up, G-Con? Good to see you, Shield Squad. I'll make you a moderator, by the way, my man. You'll see like shalom. A lot of people know that Hebrew word, this word for more than just peace, but peace is part of the concept. It means wholeness, well-being, completeness, everything how it should be type of thing. So a lot of people will say, like when they leave, you know, they might say shalom, or when they greet, they say shalom. And of course, in Arabic, it's salam, you know, da-da-da-da. So instead of saying shalom, since they're not down with that, the so-called Hebrew Israelites say shalawam. So after they leave, you know, they'll say something, they say shalawam or salakia. These are some common things, or Khan. And that's why a lot of the names have strange constructions that you can't pick up because they're in their tongue. And they'll try to teach others about why it's right. And that's the video clip I'm going to continue to play. But I would like you, Abu, to re-explain or add on to anything that I just explained about the language that we're discussing. And again, the purpose of this is to show that One West teaching is false from every distinctive that they hold to. And if you believe in this fake Hebrew language, it hinders your ability to actually study the scripture properly, because when you get into the original language, you're all messed up in the head. So, or messed up in the tongue, I should say. Abu, can you comment on that, my man?
Yes. Well, first off, with regards to the Masoretic text, which comes around the 10th century, you have a situation where before that, Hebrew manuscripts, Hebrew scrolls would not have what now are called the nikodot, the dots and lines that represent specific vocalizations. And so what the proponents of Lashawan Qadash claim is that when the dots and lines signifying vocalizations were added, that's when the vowels were added. They'll say there were no vowels in Hebrew until the Masoretic text. That's when they added the vowels. It's not quite correct. The reality is that the Masoretic text put in symbols representing vocalizations that had already existed for centuries. Now,
right, yeah. It's just codifying what had already been there, not inventing and forcing it upon the Hebrews as if they would really go along with that anyway.
And so now I want to clarify. I don't claim that the Masoretic text necessarily represents the original form of Hebrew in every single way. So now the reason why I say this is because we have ancient transliterations of Hebrew into Greek, into Latin. You have this in the Septuagint. You have this in the New Testament. To a lesser extent, you have this in the Vulgate. And I guess we have a few other sources. But what happens with these ancient transliterations, some of them predating the Masoretic text by a millennium, in 1,000 years in some cases, in the case of the Septuagint, these transliterations into the Greek text capture the way that ancient Hebrews understood the pronunciation of the language. And what we see is that a large percentage of the pronunciations in the Masoretic text are very ancient. They're corroborated by transliterations that predate them by 1,000 years. On the other hand, there are a few instances where the Masoretic text may give a pronunciation different from what exists in our ancient sources. But nonetheless, the point is that they didn't introduce vowels. They put in signs representing pronunciations that already existed. Some of those pronunciations can be shown to be very ancient, far more ancient than the Masoretic text, and some of them may be of a questionable issue, but nonetheless.
Yeah, so for example, like here we go, the Dead Sea Scrolls, they were approximately, in general, at least sometimes more, sometimes less, 1,000 years when they were discovered there. any manuscripts we had prior to that, and it didn't only include biblical text, but the bulk of it, there was a lot of that, especially when it comes to like Isaiah. And when we got into it, the big question was, would it match what we have, because these are older than what we currently had? And the answer is that we can see the Hebrew scribes were very faithful in being scribes. I mean, they're professional scribes. They took it serious. But they're still humans, and there's still different manuscript streams and traditions. So similarly, there's a carefulness and a precision and all of that type of stuff. If you read the rules of the Masoretes about how they would translate, it was very how they would how they would do their scribal work. It was very serious, very intense, very careful, highly detailed. And it seems like they kind of codified a lot of that, but that again goes back to an ancient Israelite tradition because of how seriously they took God's word. And so Abu's just getting the more precise aspect to say, just because it's sort of the passage of time, we're not saying everything is 100% perfect, but we're saying that generally this is what you got. And there's an accuracy there and a care in how God has had his word preserved. And this whole fake language actually really it harms the idea that God has properly preserved his word, because the idea is almost like, well, he hasn't even properly preserved his language until apparently the 60s, I guess. Hey, Abu, somebody asked, do any of the Hebrew Israelites speak this language fluently, or they just put it in their name and use it as a greeting for the names of God? That is an excellent question. And I think
emphatically, no, none of them speak this language.
Right.
None of them speak this language. Even the guys that go all the way back, they've just memorized a few words and they still don't understand the grammar of Hebrew. They can't read through the text. I mean, the closest thing you'll see is just, you'll see Orion Blob. He used to have this thing called Lexicon of GMS, where he would like,
what? Lexicon of GMS? Was it actually a book?
No, it was that was a YouTube page, and they would put up these videos where basically they would open up a verse from the Old Testament in the Blue Letter Bible website, and he would just start going through the verse and pronouncing it and pretending to understand the grammar, but honestly wouldn't. And you can see this everywhere, that they don't understand it. I mean, their breakdown of Jeremiah 14:2 shows that they don't really understand the grammar. Even their version of the Lord's Prayer. Orion Lob came out. I don't know if it's Orion Lob. Let me take that back. I don't want to.
Would you say
accuse him.
Has he been the most fluent speaker ever so far? And with using kind of a low standard, would he be the person who would kind of know it best?
He's the one who's shown the most willingness to work his way through a verse. You know,
okay.
But honestly, he's just using like a concordance to sort of, guide him through a verse. And he'll say, well, you see, this word is pronounced, such and such, and it means this. And this word is kadarwa, and it means this. But I don't think he really understands the grammar either. And GMS produced their own version of the Hebrew, the Lord's Prayer in Hebrew, and you could see what they did there, that they did not understand how the Hebrew language worked, even for people who are familiar with it, and maybe we'll send that out to people later on. But
yeah, and so GMS kind of seems like they're the biggest proponents, kind of keeping it alive. I was just trolling a GMS live hangout there in Dallas, and the guy got mad at me. When I say trolling, I mean theologically trolling, asking serious questions. But in a certain kind of partially what I want to do is throw them off as they're having this, live thing out there, street teaching, to make them engage with me instead of just having this echo chamber. But as I was doing it, they said, everybody curse vocab. And they all started typing out, in all caps, of course, Lashawan Qadash curses. And this was GMS. So GMS seems to have the most people who are kind of like know how to use this, because if you hear IUIC, they don't. And then it gets real crazy because some of the One West camps have even diverged and come up with their own innovations in regards to things like how to say God's name. For example, GOCC, Gathering of Christ Church, is a One West descendant. However, they call Jesus, Yeshua, and they call God Ahia. So,
yep.
But what does the rest of the One West camps? How do they say God and Jesus?
Well, they would say the Father strictly is the being the one whose name is the Tetragrammaton, so they pronounce that Yahweh again, because they assume every character is only has one pronunciation, one vocalization.
Right, and then Yahweh Shai is Jesus, right?
Exactly, which is Joshua. What we would say is Yehoshua. They say Yahweh Shai because of the way they pronounce those characters. And we can get into that. We can get into what Jesus' name is, and that's interesting as well.
You speak Lashawan Qadash? Can you speak some of it? Like, can you say a prayer? Can you say a prayer?
I guess so. I mean, I don't really like it, but like for example, when they say Deuteronomy 6:4, it's Shema Yisrael. They'll say Shema Yasha Allah, and so on down the line. I don't know. I have to say, I know we've already done it for the sake of informing people, but I personally am very uncomfortable pronouncing the Lord's name in their language. Throwing around the Tetragrammaton in their language it's problematic.
That's how this all started, because I was on with the Torah Nights, and he kept on saying you need to swear that Yahweh is Yakad. And I said, I agree with the concept, but I'm not going to use, and he got really mad. And then that's why they made this video called Vocab Alone Gets Destroyed Again by Aria Israel, which is weird because it's not in Lashawan Qadash. His name's not in Lashawan Qadash, is it? Aria Israel. Well, whatever. But let me play some more of this, and so you can see exactly what we're talking about, because he starts teaching here, and he's showing a clip. He's saying, hey, if you don't believe me, you can also believe this guy. That's kind of what he's saying.
Yeah. And he's pretending this is an independent source. It's going to be a Ryan Lob, But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's a good point. So it's not an independent source. It's another one of their guys. So here it is. It's doing the air thing, and I got to reload the video is what it is. So, hey, why reload this? Can you give some background or context or something like that?
Well, actually, if it's okay, I want to get into real quickly the whole thing about this being from a rabbinic source, if I may.
Yeah.
So, as we mentioned before, actually, I'll put it this way. I'm sure the word Lashon, or as they would say, Lashawan, you can find that in isolation somewhere in the Hebrew Bible. And the word Kodesh, or they would say Qadash, can be found somewhere in the Hebrew Bible. But that specific phrase, Lashawan Qadash, or Lashon Kodesh, you can't find that in the Hebrew Bible. It does not appear in the Hebrew Bible. And now the question becomes, well, where did Aria get it from? It's important to note, a lot of people don't know this. Aria he came out of a quasi-rabbinic background. I'm pretty sure, I know people say that Abba Bivens, the founder, the one Westerners consider him their founder. He came out of the Commandment Keepers, which was very rabbinic. But I'm pretty sure Aria, the founder of Lashawan Qadash, came out of the Commandment Keepers or something like it as well. There's a famous picture of him when he's like a young boy, and it's supposed to be his bar mitzvah. That should be a clue right there. Aria had a bar mitzvah. That should, the fact that the old school one Westers accept that Aria had a bar mitzvah should set off a bell in your ear to show you that Aria had somewhat of a rabbinic past. Now, why do I mention that? So I've mentioned two things. One, the man who came up with Lashawan Qadash had a rabbinic past. Two, the phrase Lashon Kodesh, or in their pronunciation Lashawan Qadash, cannot be found anywhere in the Hebrew Bible. So it begs the question, where did Aria get this phrase from? Here's something interesting. I'm going to pull something up real quick. Let me see if I can put up this image.
Somebody's requesting that you recite the Lord's Prayer.
No.
I don't think you're going to do it, though.
I can find it and share it, but...
Maybe next time, maybe we can find a video clip or something like that.
I could certainly find the image, and we can share that later. But right now, are you able to see on your screen? You see some Hebrew text. Well, actually, it's Aramaic at the top, but most of it's Hebrew.
Yeah, I can see it. Yep.
Okay, so this is from Mikraot Gedolot. It's a rabbinic version of the Torah. What they'll do is they'll put the biblical text side by side or page by page together with an Aramaic translation or multiple Aramaic translations, and then multiple commentaries on it.
So it's kind of like a study Bible and an interlinear, or a study Bible and a parallel Bible together.
Exactly. Okay. And so, yeah, it's very, very much like a study Bible, but the commentaries that they share are ancient. Not ancient, let me rephrase that. They're medieval, they're very old. So, for example, on the page here, in the column on the right, we have the commentary of Rashi in that very strange looking script at the top right. And then in the bottom right is the commentary of Nachmanides, right? Now, this is on specifically, for Genesis 32. what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to show a closer version of Nachmanides' commentary here. Hold on. Oops, sorry. 1 second. And by the way, these images are going to come up later. All right, let's see if this zooms in. This is a zoom in on, you should be able to see it looks like a key sitting on the text.
Yeah.
All right, okay, so.
Oh, you got to, you're about to unlock the scriptures, bro.
Well, I just used that because I didn't have a pointer on me. I did this.
You didn't have the little hand?
What's that? I didn't have that.
Yad?
Yeah, exactly. The yad. I didn't have my yad or my yod. But so I don't own one, but I know some people do. Maybe for a future hangout if we have more time.
You know a guy.
I know a guy. But so real quick, this is a close up on this. Whether Nachmanides is like 12th century or something like that, right? 12th century, 13th century. This is his commentary on Genesis 32. And where the key is, I used it to sort of point specifically at a phrase. And that phrase is Lashawan Qadash, right? But that's the phrase that they use. They would pronounce it Lashawan Qadash. So let's now
let me recap. Let me try to recap. So you've got this sort of Hebrew Jewish equivalent of a study Bible. That means there's some commentary with the Hebrew text as well as some parallels. So there's Aramaic as well, and it's all there in this work that you have. Then within that, one of the commentators, who's a very well-known one also, one of the commentators has the phrase in Hebrew that you're talking about, which is Lashawan Qadash, has it right there.
Lashawan Qadash. Well, here's this thing. Now, I'm not saying Aria got it specifically from Nachmanides, but the point is we have three factors here. Factor number one.
So we got it from some rabbinic, whoever heard it from was influenced by a rabbinic source, because it's unlikely he could read that in there, but probably someone else would have said the concept.
Here's the thing. The three premises that I would put out there is point number one, or three propositions that are worthy of note. Point number one, the phrase, however you want to pronounce it, Lashawan Qadash, it's not in the Hebrew Bible. Point number two, it is in rabbinic literature. And point number three, Aria, the founder of Lashawan Qadash dialect, had a rabbinic past. So if you want to guess, where did he get this phrase that isn't found in the Bible? Where did he get it from? It's obvious. It seems very obvious that he got it from his rabbinic past. I have something else I'll show, but I need a moment to pull that up. But
all right, now that's good. So,
but that is something for them to ponder. Why is it that the phrase doesn't appear anywhere in the Hebrew Bible, but it does appear in rabbinic literature? And isn't that interesting that it wound up appearing in the phraseology of a man with a rabbinic past? You know,
right? And again, so everybody understands, Aria was what's called one of the seven heads at the old One West School there in Harlem, New York. And Aria is really the brains behind the operation that forms the foundation. He's like the chief architect of One West distinctive doctrines. Because as mentioned before, they partially came out of something called the Commandment Keepers, which are sort of basically just like Torah observant folks there in Harlem. And they also did believe that they were true Israelites, but they accepted the Hebrew scriptures, you know, the Tanakh, and they tried to keep the law. That's why they're called the Commandment Keepers. By the way, their name unfortunately was not correct, because no one keeps the commandments. They should be it should be you know, Commandment Keepers in training or attempting, anyways. But nonetheless, the folks that eventually went to become the modern strand that we see a lot of time of Hebrew Israelites came out from there and went through a couple of transitions and ended up at a place called One West 125th Street there in Harlem. And Aria set all the calendar of when they would observe things. He came up with the language. He came up with the 12 tribes chart. And since then, even by their standards, became a heretic. He was already a heretic, God bless his soul. Prior to that, especially in regards to the failed 1999/2000 prophecy, when a lot of the One Westers went up on roofs waiting for Yahushua to come back. And unfortunately, Yahushua did not show up because Aria is a false prophet. And so,
actually, if I may, real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
To show you how far back he goes, far back he goes. Now, keep in mind, there were other people in these various schools that I would say are no longer One Westers. They they left, or maybe they never reached that point. So there are, but amongst the people who are still one Westers, the only living one to have met Abba Bivens, you know, all these guys will throw around Abba Bivens, Abba Bivens, Abba Bivens. The only ones who are still in amongst the One West spectrum who met him is Aria. Old timers like Johanna, like Tahar, they never met Abba Bivens. They never met him.
Oh, wow.
That shows how far back Aria goes. He's the only living One Wester, someone still in a One West group who goes all the way back to Abba Bivens, who met him, who studied under him. So that's how far back he goes. But if I may, to get to this point, can I show one more thing, if you don't mind?
Yeah, while you're doing that, let me explain real quick. Abba Bivens, even though I said Aria was sort of the brains, he was younger when some of this jumped off because his pops was actually in it. But Abba Bivens was like the papa of the situation. He led the original breakout from the commandment keepers and would be out there street teaching them, show them how to do it, and would get into confrontations and stuff and all of that. And when he died, the younger guys took over and had a period of slow growth, and then, you know, a period later on, what we're seeing now, more takeoff growth. And Aria made several innovations along the way, and he's actually still alive, part of a school called the Israelite Church of God in Jesus Christ. And he's sort of subservient to another man now who is named Tazadakia, who claims to be the Comforter, a.k.a. the Holy Spirit, which apparently Aria confirms, sadly enough. But it shows, you know, the dude was never really on the right stuff anyway. So Israelite Church of God is sort of the closest descendant as far as the personnel that it has from the original One West school, although their address is different. But nonetheless, ISUPK has the name of the original school, or at least one of the names of the original school, and is probably much closer in form and in function than the Israelite Church of God Jesus Christ because of all the doctrinal changes that Comfy has made and that apparently Aria has went along with. Is that a good description before you get into your joint?
Yeah, I would say
all right,
so.
Cool. All right,
real quick, I want to show something because this ties in with what I was saying about the source of the phrase, So let me pull this up. Now I'm going to show, this is a scan from a book. Tell me, you can see that paragraph?
Hold up. Let me see here. Yeah, I can. The UO. Can I tell me to read?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, read. Let me explain it. Let me lead into this first. This comes from it was a sort of a compilation by Virginia C. Mueller Gathercole. It's called Issues and Assessment of Bilinguals. Now, it's a collection, it's a compilation of articles. This comes specifically from an article titled Assessing Yiddish Plurals and Acquisition. It's by Neda Abugov and Dorit Ravid. And so this is from page 92 to 93 or something like that from Gathercole's book, Issues and Assessment of Bilinguals. Now, this is minor, what I'm going to show you here, but then I'm going to explain it. If you want to read it, you can read it, and then I'll explain its significance.
The UO community.
UO stands for Ultra-Orthodox. Go ahead.
The Ultra-Orthodox community discriminates modern Israeli Hebrew from Lashawan Qadash. The former is regarded, so that's modern Israeli Hebrew, is regarded as the spoiled language of the secular majority, revived by Ben Yehuda 100 years ago, whereas the latter, that's Lashawan Qadash, is considered the holy language of the scriptures, biblical Hebrew, Mishnaic Hebrew, post-biblical Hebrew, and early rabbinic Hebrew, the language of rabbinic literature and of rabbis and
Poskim, yeah.
Poskim also in our time. Both languages share the same orthography, but LK, that's
Lashawan Qadash.
Also LK instead of LQ, this is how we abbreviate it, employs Ashkenazi pronunciation. Well, that's interesting. What year did this book come out?
This came out 2013. You can find earlier sources. Now, I just want to mention what this is to try to explain what's going on here. Hebrew, as people know, there were major Jewish communities out there. And you have the Parsi Jews; those are the Jews living in Persian-speaking areas, mainly Iran, but also Afghanistan.
I think Paul Abdul is a descendant of them, if I'm not mistaken. Actually,
maybe, or a Syrian Jew. I think she was from a Syrian Jewish community.
Oh, really? I thought she was Persian, but okay, that's all right.
She might be. I could be wrong. I know very little about her, but nonetheless. So you have all these different groups, and then, as we know, the major groups are the Sephardic Jews and the Ashkenazi Jews. The Sephardic Jews, a lot of them were in Arabic-speaking countries. Some of them were the Sfarad referring to Spain. Some of them also spoke Ladino, which was a Jewish form of Spanish written in the Hebrew characters, while the Ashkenazis spoke mainly Yiddish, which was predominantly German with some Slavic influence, written in the Hebrew characters. Now, amongst the Ashkenazis, their pronunciation got further and further away from the pronunciations that can be found that are implied by the Masoretic text. But the thing is, it didn't really matter because most people weren't speaking Hebrew anyway. It became purely a liturgical language for the most part. People in their everyday lives amongst the Ashkenazis would speak Yiddish, and then it was only like in a liturgical context where they recite Hebrew. But their pronunciations got further and further away. With the Eliezer ben Yehuda in the 19th century, he resurrected the Hebrew language as a spoken language, and he himself, if I'm not mistaken, was from an Ashkenazi background, but he nonetheless jumped over the Ashkenazis back to the pronunciations that are found in the Masoretic text. And as a result, you have these insular, ultra-Orthodox Ashkenazi communities, especially amongst the Hasidim. Like if you go out to Williamsburg, you can find Satmar. They're a good example of this. The way they pronounce Hebrew is different from the way people in Israel, in Palestine, pronounce Hebrew, right? And now here's what happened. Most Ashkenazis accepted Ben Yehuda's and his followers accepted that their pronunciations were wrong. Their pronunciations were heavily influenced by Yiddish. But there were small groups who balked at that suggestion that their pronunciations were wrong, and they ended up rejecting what would become modern Israeli Hebrew, and they stood fast on Lashawan Qadash, or as they pronounced it in their Yiddish pronunciation, Loshen Kodesh. It's interesting because these same sorts of very Yiddish-speaking groups influenced a number of the early Israelite groups that were in Harlem. And so they may have been passing around Loshen Kodesh or Lashon Kodesh. And that's relevant because their reaction to modern Israeli Hebrew is essentially, it mirrors the One West's reaction to modern Israeli Hebrew. They're treated as ignorant. They balk at these accusations, so they try and double down on something specific. In the case of these very insular, ultra-Orthodox Ashkenazi communities, they double down on their long-standing Yiddish pronunciations. In the case of One West, they just created their own thing and ran with that. But nonetheless, Aria reached for essentially the same phrase, Lashon Kodesh. So while the Ashkenazis, the Satmar and these other insular and very exclusive Hasidic groups would say Loshen Kodesh, the One Westers started saying Lashawan Qadash. And that's interesting, that parallel there. And that parallel is not a coincidence. That's the point I've been trying to make, is that, again, the Lashon Kodesh, or however you want to pronounce it, Loshen Kodesh in the Yiddish pronunciation, or Lashawan Qadash, that phrase does not appear in the Bible. It does appear in rabbinic literature. It has a long standing in rabbinic literature. And Aria, who had a rabbinic past, a quasi-rabbinic past, conveniently wound up using the same phrase, even if he pronounced it differently.
It's crazy, man, because it's like they really don't have anything unique to themselves. Everything seems to be a ripoff. You got the Anglo-Israelites who already had kind of like their own 12 tribes chart and had similar kind of bad arguments based upon words sounding similar and the whole thing, like, British, Beret, and this means covenant man and all this kind of stuff. It's like, it's sad, man, because there's no real innovation. It seems like, they sampled a little bit of this, sampled a little bit of that, and made something mixed up together, but kind of like, it's just, hey, man, I'm just saying, because if like they're really the real Israelites, it seems like they wouldn't have to be biting so hard, those fake Jews, at least from their perspective, that they say they are. But we made this point before, and Tahar's explanation was that similar to how people forgot how to do some certain martial art, and Hoisey Gracie had to reteach them all, like the Japanese masters forgot.
It's a fun analogy. As a man who's long been into the martial arts, I'm a man who's loved judo for 20 years. I like Tahar's explanation. I think it's bogus, but I do appreciate it. The fact that he reached for that martial arts analogy. He said that just as you know, people who knew judo and the form of jiu-jitsu that predated judo, the Japanese lost track of it, and the Brazilians captured the pure form, so they had to go to them to learn. And just as certain people who were into Muay Thai from Thailand had to go to Holland to, you know, learn that, so too, you know, at first they had to learn a little bit from the, you know, from the so-called Jews, as they like to call them, you know, but now they got it. Now they got the true breakdowns of the King James Bible or whatever.
Let's continue with this Torah night critique of me, where the man is teaching me the true language that I would not agree to speak. And here he continues in the video saying, hey, here's another source agreeing with me. So listen up, Vocab Malone, because the title of the video is Vocab Malone Gets Destroyed Again. Here is the video continuing. It's going to do it again. Every time I wait too long, what it does is I got to reload it. And so I got to reload it again as well to get back to it. And the last time this happened is how we got off on rabbit trails and stuff. But again, this is a Tanakh only group called the Torah Knights, and what they're doing here is they're trying to explain, well, it's one particular member trying to explain to me and I guess everybody else why their understanding of Hebrew is correct and how I should accept this name, because they say at one point, this is not in this video, but it's in another video, that a true Hebrew would know the name of God, I think is what the guy said at one point. And also it proved I was involved in witchcraft and demonic activity because I wouldn't say the name that they liked. Here we go. Here's a video.
Here's in the Assyrian script for Aramaic, and that's how you pronounce it, This is the ancient Hebrew, Lashawan Qadash, So whenever you see this letter is pronounced the same way as this one, they all pronounce All right, now the Aramaic is pronounced different, of course, but you know, they have in these Torahs and Tanakhs today. So this is how we know. This is what we have to read. They don't have these ancient Paleo Hebrew scripts out there. I mean, if they do have them, you know, they're maybe hard to find or expensive. So when you read it, you can just read it as you read the ancient Hebrew. So this is and that's Ba, and that's Ba. This looks more like a Ra. I mean, sometimes the Ba has like a little extension here on the bottom. All right. Then you got Ga in the Assyrian script, and then Ga in the Lashawan Qadash. Da, and you can see the pronunciation right here. Ha, and then the Ha in the ancient Hebrew. Wa, and the Wa in the ancient. The Za in the Assyrian script. Za there, and this is the Za in the ancient Hebrew. Cha, Ta, and you got Ya, and then you got the Ka.
All right, so as you.
All right, so he's going to comment now on what we just saw. So that was a GMS proponent breaking down their unique, peculiar, esoteric, contrived Harlem Hebrew, and now the man critiquing me is going to continue in his video saying what he's got to say, and then I'll let Abu comment after he says a little something here. Here's what the man said.
You can see, you know, we broke down the alphabet in the Hebrew to show you how it's pronounced. You know what I'm saying? So no, there's no way you can get Yahweh. You know what I'm saying? Then I went to the next video. I didn't complete the whole thing because I just went over the alphabet myself. But I went to the next video to show you that it's not just the Torah Knights that's pronouncing this Hebrew and doing the work to show the name, you know what I'm saying, and the correct pronunciations of the Hebrew language, right? Now I'm gonna go to another video where someone else is also calling the name of God Yahweh, because you know what I'm saying, most of you so-called Israelites or so-called blacks, you know what I'm saying, you believe a white man and his word. So I'm gonna go to a white man pronouncing the name Yahweh, you know what I'm saying, to show you even the heathen is starting to catch on to the name. All right, so
I'm gonna pause there. I'm going to let him play this last video when we come back to it. There's like 40 seconds left of the video that we're going to show. The video itself is longer. The video we're talking about is Vocab Malone Gets Destroyed Again. Is where one of the Torah Knights came after me for not agreeing with their contrived language that they still hold on to for some reason from One West, even though I guess they say they're not One Westers. And so we use it as a chance to teach, and I got sort of a Shield Squad historian of the Hebrew Israelite One West movement, Abu. Abu, can you help us understand what he was saying and the whole point of that there? Because I think people might just got kind of lost, some guy looking at an alphabet. Can you help people understand what the point from their perspective there would be?
Well, as we covered before, again, they have their own little distinct dialect of Hebrew. It's essentially modern Hebrew, just with the pronunciations changed. The major innovation is that in their belief, every character only has one vocalization. So, for example, the sixth character of the Hebrew alphabet, which most people today would call the Vav, I think more generally call it the Wa, they would say it's only pronounced Wa, and therefore it can never be pronounced We. So how could you get Yahweh? That's their whole point. How could you get these other vocalizations if, according to their presupposition, every Hebrew character has only one vocalization, and therefore it does, and those vocalizations don't include the ones you would need for Yahweh? That's the gist of his argument.
So that's important to say right there. So they're saying God's name has got to be Yahweh, and we're not sacred namers. So we don't get caught up on if you don't, vocalize God's name right, you're not going to be saved. I've heard one Westerners misuse Acts 4:12, which says there is only one name given to men under heaven by which they may be saved. And they'll misuse it to say that if you get that name wrong, then you can't be saved because there's only one name given. And I've also heard when Rakar debated James White and did not do that well, which is sort of a British understatement. I heard some one Westers come after him in their critique of the debate and say, this is what happens when you don't use the right name for God, because Rakar and GOCC say Ahaya, which this was actually partially debated in one of the debates that James White and Rakar had. And so they would actually use it to kind of say you don't have your spiritual power because you're not using it. And GMS, utilizes this Lashawan Qadash to even, do curses. I don't know if people understand. That's something that you'll hear. Sometimes if you watch a GMS video of them out in the street and somebody steps to them, they'll start doing these little chants that kind of sounds like they're a bunch of clucking hens or chickens. And you're kind of like, wait, what's going on? What's going on here? And what they're doing is they're being led a lot of times by one of the main leaders there in a curse in their language, because GMS especially does believe in cursing people in this language. I guess it's better than the other kind of cursing that they tend to do, but here is a curse like, almost like the imprecatory prayers is what they're called, the Psalms. They believe they're doing that in their language. And somebody needs to make like a missal, like in more liturgical churches, they have a missal, M-I-S-S-A-L. I don't mean the missal like the kind of the Har says you'll be missal food. I don't mean that, but M-I-S-S-A-L, where it's like, the liturgical order for that stuff. They need to make a Hebrew Israelite missal where it's like, okay, here's some imprecatory prayers. Here's the Lord's Prayer. Here's this phrase, sort of with lexicon, with like lexical issues in it. That'd be interesting and fun, but they're not very systematic. So I don't think we could expect that from them anytime soon.
Real quick, this bit of a segue here. If someone in the chat, I think it was Raquel, she said, I want to see that Lord's Prayer in Lashawan Qadash. I actually have it. I found it. I went looking around. I got it. Now, let me be clear. I got the GMS version. If I'm not mistaken, this is the distinctly GMS version. Now, my history could be slightly off here, but as I understand it, One West used a different Lashawan Qadash Lord's Prayer, and somebody in GMS, I'm guessing Aria Lab, tried to update it, and they made some...
What's the title of the video? Are you going to play it?
It's not a video. It's just going to be just a picture. I'll pull it up right now. Hold on one second.
Oh, it's kind of like what I was saying. Okay. Right. All right. I want to see this.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think... Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. So...
Let me see if I can zoom in.
So where in the world did you get this from?
Oh, you can find it online. I've had it in my email for a while. But, yeah. So you can see that, right?
Yeah.
All right. So let me give you one.
Are there Paleo Hebrew characters accurate, by the way? Do you know?
The characters are accurate. Well, those are real characters that existed. Right. It's the Phoenician script, and Hebrew was once written in this script. Later on, it took on the what we now call popularly people call it the standard Hebrew script or the square Hebrew script. In Hebrew itself, it's called the Ketav Ashuri, the standard Hebrew script, which literally means Assyrian writing. And so apparently they adopted this from the Assyrians. I don't.
You mean the actual form of the letters?
Yes, the form of the letters, not the language, but yeah, they adopted it. And so before they adopted the standard script, this is what's called the Paleo Hebrew script. It's really the Phoenician script. And this is sort of the foundation of many of the scripts that are out there. The Greek script comes from this, and of course the essentially Arabic and the Samaritan script and the various Syriac scripts, and Hebrew comes from this Phoenician script as well. And Hebrew was once written in this, and the Dead Sea Scrolls include some Phoenician script manuscripts, some fragments that are in so-called Paleo Hebrew. So the characters are correct. The Hebrew is bad though, and I wanted to point that out.
You wouldn't say this? We should try to chant this together.
No. Yeah, right, Albanawa. Yeah, no. But I do.
Aya, Kadosh, Shabbat Shemayam.
Well, you got to go from right to left. I
was okay because they have it like that. So I was looking at the English. They do have it like that.
It's Albanawa, Shabbat Shemayam.
Abanawa, Shabbat Shemayam, Kadosh, Aya, Shamka, Yahweh, Malakwataka, Taba, Ratazaka, Haya, Isha. I'm not doing it right, man.
You're doing it, but it's killing me. Part of me, a small part of me dies listening to this.
Haya, Bashamayam. What? Looks like Nathan
Lanawa.
Lakam, Kal Yawam, Wasala Kalawawa, Chawa, Chewbacca.
Yes.
Kasalakawanawa.
I want to go back up to the top.
Babanawaya, Banasawan, Alba, Hawashininawa, Mayan, Kawa, Laka, Hamalakawatha, Wahalawa, Watada. Oh my goodness. Wa'afa parafa lawalamayam. Aman. Now, Khan, they say Khan, which is like yes.
Correct.
What's the real Hebrew on that?
Ken.
So they're always saying Khan. That's the Lashawan Qadash. I keep on saying Qadash, but it's Kadosh.
No, it's Qadash.
Okay.
To ensure that they pronounced the kaf differently from the kuf, Aria made sure that one was pronounced ka, which is the equivalent of the k, and the other one was pronounced. He was looking for the equivalent of the q, and he wound up settling on qua. Hence why, for example, Aria's father, who used to be Jacob, when they adopted Lashawan Qadash, they started calling him Yaiquab. You might hear them talk about Yaiquab all the time.
Which is so interesting how they all changed their names when they adopted this new language. Because prior to that, they had standard names like Masha was Moshe.
Exactly, Moshe. Yep, Moshe ben Kalim. Yeah, and then he became Masha.
Yeah. So I mean, this is pretty wild, man. But okay, that was.
I want to make a quick point about because this is the distinct GMS version. There was an older One West version that was different from this, and I could be wrong, but I'm guessing that GOCC probably has their own version by now. Whatever the case, I wanted to focus on that top line for a quick second, right? In a standard Hebrew translation of the Lord's Prayer. Now, of course, the Lord's Prayer, our oldest versions are in Syrian Aramaic and in Greek. And then, of course, we have Latin versions. I don't know, maybe some people are familiar with some of the famous, they call it the Pater Noster, right? Pater Noster, qui es in celis, etc. But I want to point this out, where they try to say holy, how the famous saying is, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. I believe that's the King James version, right? So the way they try to say hallowed be thy name, literally holy, your name is holy, was what the way it would translate. A very straightforward Hebrew translation of that would be Yitkadesh Shemcha, right? Yitkadesh Shemcha. Now, the thing is, the old One West version just took a Hebrew version of the Lord's Prayer and redid it in Lashawan Qadash pronunciation. And that's usually how Lashawan Qadash works. They'll take something that already exists, even though they say that they're the only ones who know Hebrew, they basically go to actual Hebrew sources, take their stuff and change the pronunciation. And that's what One West did. Someone in GMS, I'm guessing Ariam Lob, tried to correct the old One West version and came up with this version. And here's something interesting. When you get a standard translation of Hebrew, of the Lord's Prayer, Yit Kadesh Shemcha, right? Yeah, your name is holy, hallowed be thy name, however you want to put it. The Hebrew doesn't use the copula like the way we do. Like in English, you say, you are happy, or you are sad. In Hebrew and also in Arabic, sometimes the copula drops. The copula is the verb to be, especially in the present tense, right? So I think whoever did this, they noticed that the verb to be wasn't in the Hebrew translation, and they thought they would try and throw it back in. Now, the verb to be, the root of the verb to be is haya in both actual Hebrew and Lashawan Qadash. It's haya. That's the root of the verb to be, but that gets conjugated different ways, depending on its tense and so on. They don't understand the tenses. They don't understand how to break down the verb, and they don't understand that it's not needed, right? But because they noticed that the verb to be didn't appear in the Hebrew translation, they tried to put it in, because we say, hallowed be thy name, right? Your name is holy. So when we speak in English, we use the verb to be. You don't need to use that in a Semitic language. It's not in the Syriac. It's not in, it's not going to be in Arabic translations. I could pull one out. But, because he was thinking in English, he thought he would throw it in. And he knew that the root for the verb to be is haya, but he didn't understand the way the roots work. So he just threw haya in there. Haya is the past tense construction of the verb to be.
Hallowed was your name.
Yes, precisely. He was trying to see hallowed be thy name. Your name is holy, and he wound up
you can
ignorant.
This to be,
and he did it a couple of
where,
times, at least 3
Ricard
times.
got haya.
Yeah,
that's where Ricard got haya, right? Because he's like saying it has to do with is.
Well, he got it. Yes, it's related to that, right? He got it from the first imperfect tense. Some would say future tense. Version of the verb is ehye in Hebrew, and when Lashawan Qadash it gets ahaya. Ehye appears in Exodus 3:14 when Moses asks God's name, and his response is ehye asher ehye. That's usually translated I am that I am, or something to that effect. It could literally be translated I will be that which I will be. It doesn't have to be future tense, but it's imperfect tense, and that's where they get it. It's from the same root, but that's a good example of that. Ehye would be an example of the imperfect tense, and they put in the past tense, essentially the perfect tense, the completed tense, and he did it out of ignorance. And first off, you don't need the verb to be in there anyway. It's a person familiar with Semitic languages know that, but he thinking in English, he threw it in, and then he threw the wrong construction. It's very interesting to see that. I'm going to close that up though.
The guy in the vision should have told him all this, because there is one story about a dude who pops out and he starts speaking in a tongue that Aria doesn't recognize. It's like a vision in the night is one version I heard. I heard conflicting versions, but they all have like a black dude, one he's like dressed in all black, or he's an angel. There's different versions, I think, but and he starts speaking, and Aria's like, hey, what are you saying? What is that? And he says, that's the tongue of our forefathers. And that's sort of where he got the initiative, is with certain versions I've heard for the LQ. I think there's another Hebrew Israelite rapper. Everybody talks about Kendrick, and now this dude Kodak Black. I think maybe, at least from his name, we could assume maybe he is too. Waka Flocka Flame. That's a joke, everybody. It's a joke because of his name. It's starting to sound like all this Waka Flocka Flame. But anyways, maybe that's where that's what Yahweh spoke to Moses from in Exodus 3, the Waka Flocka Flame. Anyways, we're getting towards the end of what we got to do with this. I was gonna play one of the section, Abu, of this little video here. But while I'm setting that up, what are some final things you maybe want to say? Because we're gonna try to wind it down pretty quick here.
I don't have anything to say at the moment. I mean, there might be some things that I would like to say just to close up on. Actually, what we should go over is, honestly, we should go over the point about that in Semitic languages, including Hebrew, a single consonant can have multiple vocalizations, because his whole argument rests on the assumption that every character only has one vocalization, and therefore, it can't be the one that you settled on. And B, then maybe we could very quickly get into the evidence for Yahweh, for the pronunciation Yahweh. That's up to you, though, of course.
Right. Yeah, because usually we try to keep these shorter, but tonight is so technical and there's so much to it. And people are still, engaging. One person says, please, Abu, don't tell us that it gets worse. You know who you are, Chair. Because once you drop that past tense, it's like, oh man, it's like it just keeps on stacking up of some of the issues with it. But the Torah nights, I mean, guys, you got
to the night. All right.
the video guy who confirms.
Yahweh, the name of the Lord. The name of the Lord. Yahweh, you hear that?
Et Shem.
The name
Yahweh.
Yahweh, you hear that?
Name of the missing the aleph is gone, the ta is there. Et Shem.
The name
Yahweh.
Yahweh, you hear
The
that?
name of the Lord.
The name of the Lord.
All right, one more time for this. One more time.
One more again. All right, so he plays it again, but I think you got the idea. That's how it ends. All right, Abu, I'll let you comment because that's a perfect place to transition on what you wanted to say earlier.
Okay,
About
yeah,
the name
yeah,
of
yeah.
God.
Well, first off, like I said, we've said multiple times now, they assume that there's, and this is the primary assumption of Lashawan Qadash, is that there is only one possible pronunciation for every single Hebrew character. But that's not the way that words work in Semitic languages. I want to use an analogy from Arabic. You should be able to see some Arabic text on the screen. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You're not sharing anything right now.
Ooh.
You trying to share something?
Yeah, are you able to see some Arabic text on the screen? It should be a white screen with some black text. It says I'm sharing it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see it. My bad. I see it. Yep.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead.
So now I'm using an Arabic analogy. I've tried to use Arabic analogies in the past with one-Westers, and they always try to say, well, that's Arabic. That's Arabic. But let's be honest. They try to approach Hebrew from their assumptions in English, while that's a Teutonic language. It's a Germanic language.
Right.
Hebrew is a Semitic language. It makes much more sense to approach Hebrew from Arabic. And it's good to explain to use the Arabic as an analogy. But before I jump into this Arabic, I just want to use a quick analogy from English. Now, the analogy fits less well with English, but it's just able to help them. Think of a word that's spelled W-I-N-D, right? Wind or wind. How do you pronounce that word, W-I-N-D? Well, if I say I'm going to wind my watch, or wind the clock, or wind up this ball of yarn, it's pronounced one way. But if I say the wind is blowing, it's pronounced a different way, right? Same letters, different pronunciation. You also see that with the verb read. Like you say, he will read the book today. He's going to read from the Bible, R-E-A-D. And yet when he's finished, we say he read from the book, R-E-A-D. Same spelling, different pronunciation. Now, that's a very soft analogy. I think Arabic and other Semitic languages, I could go into Syriac as well, into Aramaic. To show you this point, I want to give this example. What we have here is I have two Arabic words on the left. And much like Hebrew and Aramaic, Arabic has a consonantal structure. And just like across the Semitic languages, although you have the consonants can be vocalized in different ways. And if anyone wants to know, well, how do you know how they're pronounced? Familiarity with the language will help you understand that. Now, of these two Arabic words, one is a verb, one is the active participle of that verb. What I did is I transliterated it into the standard Hebrew script and then again into the Phoenician script, just so they can know what characters we're looking at. So, for example, in the top Arabic phrase, a word, it's alif, sin, lam, mim. It corresponds to alif, sin, lamed, mem. And then the bottom one is almost the exact same spelling. Instead of an alif, it's a mem. Now, the top, so just to make sure where the corresponding characters are, I'm color coding them. I know one-Westers love to crack these homoerotic jokes. They're probably going to call this a rainbow flag or something like that. I just did this. Can you see the multiple colors?
Yeah.
I just did this just so we can know what character goes where, right? Just so you understand that this character corresponds to, because every single Hebrew character corresponds exactly with an Arabic character. The only difference is the Arabic alphabet has more characters than Hebrew does at present. But every single Hebrew character corresponds to an Arabic character. And in this case, the Arabic characters correspond to the Hebrew characters. The top word, right? It's spelled almost exactly the same as the bottom word, only the first letter is different, right? So now here's the point. The top word it's the verb to submit or to give up. And it's actually where we get the word Islam from. This is not the word Islam, but it's the verb from which Islam comes. This is aslama. Like, for example, in Arabic translations of the Bible, if they might talk about somebody dying to give up the spirit, he gave up the spirit, it'll say aslama arruh, right? He gave up the spirit. Aslama, right? The bottom one is the active participle of that verb, Muslim. That's the word Muslim at the bottom. Now, I just wanted to focus on this because we have in these two words, the last three characters are exactly the same, yet they're pronounced differently. If we had applied Lashawan Qadash to this, we would say the top one has to be pronounced Ashalam, and the bottom one has to be pronounced Mashalam, but that's not the pronunciation. The point of the analogy is, within Semitic languages, a single consonant can have multiple vocalizations. It can be vocalized different ways depending on its pronunciation. Depending on its context, how it appears in a specific word, how it appears in a sentence, etc. And so now they say, oh, but that's Arabic, that's not Hebrew. But the thing is, what's true of Arabic in this regard is also true of Hebrew. The Hebrew characters can be pronounced in multiple different ways. There's multiple possible vocalizations. And this is not a modern concept. This doesn't start with Eliezer ben Yehuda. It's not a medieval concept. It does not start with the Masoretes, right? The Masoretic text doesn't begin with them either. Like I mentioned before, we have ancient transliterations in the Septuagint and in the New Testament as well, the Greek New Testament. And what we can see there is that those transliterations, when they're writing Hebrew words in the Greek text, transliterating it, transcribing it, they capture the pronunciation, and they show that even those ancient sources understood that, just as the case is with Arabic now, was the case with ancient Hebrew, that different characters could be pronounced different ways, vocalized different ways, depending on where they fell in a word or in a sentence. Their context could change the pronunciation. So there were multiple vocalizations. And the thing is, I think the Torahites, they would reject the New Testament, but they still need to ask themselves, even if they reject the New Testament, where do they think these transliterations come from? Like, for example, when every text will render something Elohim, what is that based on, And why is it that you see that in these ancient transcriptions? The Torahites simply trusted Lashawan Qadash, which the philosophy of that, which they imbibed over the internet, this assumption that Hebrew characters only have one vocalization. But the ancient evidence shows that there are multiple vocalizations for Hebrew characters. And so it begs the question, why should we accept their assumption, which they merely, imbibed off of the internet, when we have the evidence that, just like with other Semitic languages, Hebrew characters can be vocalized in multiple ways. I hope that analogy made some sense.
Well, so is it a rough equivalent to talk about, the letter A? It has the short and then the long, A, Ah.
Yeah.
I mean, how, so, there's other, E, Eh, that type of thing. Is it a similar thing? But yet this Lashawan Qadash just has one pronunciation for them.
Right. The English sort of gives us a soft analogy, but the better analogy would be other Semitic languages, that these characters, these consonants, and they are consonants, can be pronounced a variety of different ways. And that's like a key point, and it does beg the question of where they think these pronunciations came from. Did they come out of thin air? When did they begin? And what's the evidence for their claim? Something interesting, the 18th character of the the Hebrew alphabet, right? We generally call it the Tzadi, right? Corresponds to the Arabic Sad. That character in Lashawan Qadash, it got rendered Taza. Now this is significant. In certain mainstream Jewish, not all, but some mainstream Jews transliterate that character TZ. Some transcribe it TS, but many transcribe it TZ. So for example, you could put Yitzhak in Google, YITZ, CHAK or something like that, or HAK. or you could just put Tzade, Tzade. The point I'm making here is that mainstream Jews, rabbinic Jews, will often transcribe that character TZ. Now, Aria was just throwing the A vowel everywhere except in the ayin. So, for example, he saw the bet is pronounced B, he just called it Ba. He saw the Dalet is pronounced like a D, so he just put Da. And Gimel, he put Ga. He's just throwing the A vowel everywhere. Aria wound up at the Tzade and saw that it was transliterated with 2 consonants in the Latin script, TZ, because it's supposed to be like tz. And he threw the A vowel in twice, and that's what Taza comes from. It's absurd, and I would challenge any proponent of Lashawan Qadash to name a single piece of evidence that anyone before Aria pronounced that character Taza. We have many transliterations going all the way back to ancient days, and nobody pronounces it Taza. It's a complete innovation, and we know how it came about. It's so obvious because he was throwing the A vowel in everywhere, and in his source there were 2 Latin characters for that, so he threw it in twice.
And I think this is important to point out. If I get the point right, let me try this. Again, we're trying to show how this is important because it ends up affecting people's lives and in multiple ways, some small, some big. For example,
it's also used to deceive them. They use it to keep people in the dark because they claim they have this distinct form of Hebrew, and they use it to keep people in the dark because what'll happen is they train people to think if someone's using proper Hebrew and therefore using vocalizations that they claim aren't properly part of Hebrew, they train you to think, oh, well, he's just speaking Yiddish, he doesn't know Hebrew, So you just got to trust us. Just trust us because we're the only ones who are doing that Paleo Hebrew, that ancient Hebrew. When they're not, they're just coming up with these modern concocted, late 20th century concoctions of the pronunciation. But,
Well, so, when people who think they're Hebrew Israelites think they come to the knowledge of that truth, a common thing is they go through some kind of process, which is, common in religious conversions or whatever, where they undergo a name change quite frequently. And a lot of times you can tell if they're one West influence because the name change will then result in some kind of Lashawan Qadash name. So, for example, Captain Tazariak.
Hey, there's that Taza.
Yeah, that's why I just brought that one up, because it affects people's lives to the point where they're actually then adopting names based upon this falsehood. Or Tazadakia, who's supposed to be the Holy Spirit. I feel like the Holy Spirit would know, since he's the one who inspired the Bible. But apparently, he forgot his language or something along the way and had to get retaught. But nonetheless,
nothing ancient about Taza, that pronunciation.
Yeah. So you see in people's names how it actually shows up, So I just thought I'd point that out. Now, again, going back, the proof text that they've used here is Zephaniah 3:9, and that's where the justification comes from this. And of course, it's incorrect. And there's really no other proof text that I know of that they use, unless
and even if it did,
I don't know.
Even so, like let's assume that, just for the sake of argument, let's assume that Zephaniah 3:9 means that God is going to bring back the oldest form of Hebrew. You notice that there's a leap in logic there, where they say, the pure tongue, therefore that's this dialect that Aria came out with in the late 20th century. It's got to be that. And it begs the question, even if we did agree that what the verse means is that God is going to bring back the oldest form of Hebrew, how does Aria's made-up dialect just win by default? It really begs the question.
Right.
It's especially with such modern these modern innovations like Taza for the Tzade. It's just It's a huge leap in logic.
It's kind of like, doesn't the Bible say Jesus is coming back? Hey, I'm Jesus. Here I am, guys.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Jesus coming back, but that doesn't mean the guy claiming that he's Jesus is the right one. So I've tried to multiple times get into Zephaniah 3:9 to give people the actual right interpretation. I want to do that at least one more time, which is as we read it, it says, "For at that time I will change the speech of the peoples to a pure speech." Remember, this is right after a judgment text, and then there's a sort of a restoration, promise of deliverance and hope text. And what is it saying? Remember, it's the peoples. It's not just Israelites. It's the peoples. And this pure speech is not about the form. It's about the function. It really has to do with what they say. And remember, what proceeds out of the mouth shows what's up in the heart. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So it has to do with God's people speaking pure and proper, especially in relationships to him, that all of them may call upon the name of the Lord. And so the speech also reflects a certain knowledge. They know who God is, and that's why they're able to converse with him and speak to him and pray to him and worship him. That's why they can call upon Yahweh. And it's interesting because you get into the new covenant and you see that anyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. And that's referring there to Yeshua, Jesus Christ, not Yahushai. But that's who it's referring to. And serve him with one accord. Remember, this is the peoples, all of them, now serving with one accord. From beyond the rivers of Cush, my worshipers, the daughter of my dispersed one shall bring my offering. And you see in Genesis chapter 11, right? In Genesis chapter 11 there, the Tower of Babel on the plain of Shinar. And in that situation, prior to the judgment that Yahweh brought down on the people for trying to build this tower to kind of compete with God, basically, the world was monolingual, meaning one language at this time. Verse 5, they have one language and they're one people. It's only beginning what they will do. So God knew that people being united this way in sin would be a bad thing. And so, as often happens, sin brings division. And so people were no longer able to understand each other. And so then they broke up into the speech groups. And that's sort of where you get now all the way, thousands of years later, different what are called people groups that kind of began there at Babel in a lot of ways. Well, this is interesting because Zephaniah, in a way, is sort of a reverse of the curse, where you see now there's God's people, and there's this idea of they speak sort of in unison as far as in regards to their thought. And you see the beginning of that promise coming about when the new covenant is getting enacted in full in Acts chapter 2, where the Bible says they all spoke in different tongues and people were able to hear them in their own language. It's the reverse of the curse, and it mentioned all kinds of people. Verse 5, for there were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men from every nation under heaven. And at this sound, the multitude came together, and they were bewildered because each one was hearing them speak in his own language. The Holy Spirit can do that. I don't think Lashawan Qadash was present, though, there. And they were amazed and astonished, saying, are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear each of us in his own native language? Parthians and Medes and Elamites and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt, and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, both Jews and proselytes. They try to make proselytes just other Jews, but it's clear from the and also just from the text as you see it, because you got a chi there, meaning it's a conjunction. Both, you have that word as well, te there, both Jews and proselytes, Christians and Arabians, we hear them telling in our own tongues the mighty works of God. And all were amazed and perplexed, saying one to another, what does this mean? And then you see in Revelation 5, people from every nation, tribe, and tongue join together as they worship at the throne of the Lamb. And so I just want to point out the actual proper interpretation and the other thematic strands that you see in God's word are actually quite beautiful. And it's a shame to misuse Zephaniah 3:9 in this sad proof texting kind of way for something that really doesn't even exist except in people's minds. Lashawan Qadash, it didn't exist until this innovation at Harlem, and it has no historical precedent. It's false. It's one of the tools that this false religion uses to keep people in bondage. It limits your ability to study God's word, and it even affects people as they change their name, like Tazadakia and Tazariak, into these fraudulent, made-up, contrived names. And unless Aria repents, he's not going to be the only one responsible. But like all of us, I really feel like there's a severe judgment that he would be awaiting for all of this that he has brought upon as a false teacher there at One West, and now people are going along with it. That's sort of my final word. I'd like to hear your final word, Abu. By the way, somebody thinks you should take us out on the Lord's Prayer in Hebrew. Lord's Prayer in Hebrew.
We could try that, but no, what I would prefer to do is attempt to make a small case for Yahweh. Since where did we start this with? We started with a video that that ended with excuse me. We began with a video that was accusing you of using a wrong name, Yahweh, some sort of bogus name. They're saying that obviously Yahweh has to be the correct name. I was wondering if we could very quickly go over just a tiny bit of evidence, interesting evidence in favor of Yahweh.
All right.
If we could. All
That'll be
right.
the last thing. Go ahead.
All right, let me pull this up real quick. I just got to get my, sorry, hold on a second. Just got to pull up this. Open with. Forgive me, I'm just pulling up the image real quick, and then I'm going to share it.
There's a guy who's a Hebrew Israelite, IGIC Knoxville, and he says Hebrew Israelites know that Lashawan Qadash is not right. They don't care. They want to separate. They don't want the language the Jewish Ashkenazi Sephardic speak.
I don't know what to make of that. I mean, I'll say this. This is why we both of us have been careful to mention the One West spectrum. There are many other men out there, men and women who would identify as Hebrew Israelites who do use proper Hebrew. Perhaps a very popular example right now is Zion Lex. Of course, we both have our disagreements with Zion Lex, but he certainly deserves credit and respect for using proper Hebrew, for showing a very real knowledge of Hebrew. So it's a distinctly One West thing, Lashawan Qadash. But if this guy is saying that the people who use Lashawan Qadash know it's false, but they just do it out of spite because they don't want to have anything in common, with the so-called fake Jews, I really have to shake my head at that, because you're still going to have a lot of things in common with them. And if you strip away everything, you're going to lose quite a bit. It seems ridiculous to throw away the attempts to learn the actual Hebrew language and just accept something that was made up. It's kind of bogus. That's a strange explanation. But anyway, let's get into the evidence for.
This is the last thing we're going to do, guys. Briefly, we're going to do this and then close us out tonight here. Go ahead, brother man.
Okay, so now you should see some Hebrew characters on your screen. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, sir, we do.
Okay, so this is a word. Now the nikudot, the vowels, the points, they are deliberately in there. They're in there for a reason. Now, this is the word that appears in Exodus 3:14 when Moses asks for God's name, and God responds, Ehyeh, Asher Ehyeh. Ehyeh is the verb to be in the imperfect tense or future tense. If you want to get into a hyper literal approach to, say, modern Hebrew conceptions of the tenses, but imperfect tense is the more proper way to put it. It's not necessarily imperfect, not literally future tense, but whatever the case, Ehyeh. Now, I put the vowels in there just to establish this pronunciation. Ehyeh is what appears in Exodus 3:14, but elsewhere we get the tetragrammaton, right? Now, Ehyeh, as I said, is the imperfect tense of the verb to be in the first person, So now that raises the question, what is the third person singular equivalent of that? And the answer is, if I can pull it up real quick here, is Yihyeh. So you have Ehyeh, and then that's first person, and now I put Yihyeh. That's the third person. Now you'll notice Yihyeh looks almost identical in its consonantal structure. The consonants are almost identical to the tetragrammaton. The tetragrammaton is Yod He Wa He, and this is Yod He Yod He. Now I share this because what I would propose is the Hebrew Bible, when you read it, there's clearly a correspondence between Ehyeh and the tetragrammaton, and we're trying to find the pronunciation of the tetragrammaton. They say Yahweh, we say Yahweh. Now, it's interesting that if the tetragrammaton is related to Ehyeh, and Ehyeh is the first person pronunciation, the first person construction, and the third person construction is Yihyeh, an easy assumption is that the tetragrammaton is something akin to an irregular form of Yihyeh, or an irregular equivalent. Now, that's overly simplistic, I admit. Some people would say it actually combines the imperfect tense and the participle and the past tense or the perfect tense. So you say, hu, hove, howe, or haya, and Yihyeh, etc. But whatever the case, the point is that there's a relationship between the tetragrammaton and Ehyeh. And if that can be admitted, then there's a relationship between the third person version of Ehyeh. Ehyeh is first person. Yihyeh, which is on your screen, is the third person. We know from elsewhere in the Bible that the first syllable of the Tetragrammaton is pronounced Yah. And we know that words related to Ehyeh, which the Tetragrammaton is, at least according to the Masoretic text, are 2 syllables. So you have Ehyeh, you have Yihyeh. So then with the Tetragrammaton, following that similar structure and knowing that the first syllable is pronounced Yah, an easy assumption is that it's pronounced Yahweh, following this structure where you put the Wa, or some people say Vav, in place of where the Yod is in Yihyeh. Now, people are going to say, well, that's kind of speculative, isn't it? You know, you're just sort of assuming. That brings us to an interesting point. Clement of Alexandria, in his Stromata, which we're talking about a very ancient text, he attempted to transliterate the Tetragrammaton as it was recited by the Jews who lived in his time. This is Clement, so we're talking, you know, the Ante-Nicene period. This predates even the Council of Nicaea. He attempted to transliterate the pronunciation, which I just speculated might be pronounced Yahweh in light of the available evidence, in light of its relation to Yihyeh, but following the Masoretic text, I speculated that one conclusion is that it would be pronounced Yahweh. Interestingly enough, centuries before the Masoretic text, when Clement tried to transliterate it into Greek, he transliterated, as you can see in your on your screen. There's some Greek text I have underlined, Yahweh. So the oldest transliteration of the Tetragrammaton into a Greek text is Yahweh. So following the logic of the Masoretic text, you get close to something like Yahweh. Now, I know the Masoretic text itself points the Tetragrammaton differently, but that's deliberately set up so that the reader can pronounce it as similar to Adonai. But the point is, putting that aside and just following its relationship with Ehyeh and Yihyeh, it's reasonable to conclude that it's pronounced Yahweh. And then while we have that admittedly partially speculative approach, then we get corroboration in the oldest transliteration of it. We have a very ancient transliteration of how Jews in that time were pronouncing it, and they were pronouncing it Yahweh. Now, here's real quick a funny thing. I remember Aria tried to address this years ago, and he said, well, Clement didn't know Hebrew. Maybe he didn't know. The funny thing is, I'm willing to concede that, but here's the funny thing. Aria doesn't know Hebrew either. The point is that Aria lives in the 20th century. Clement lived in ancient times, and he wound up with this ancient pronunciation, Yahweh. And I think that's very interesting. Some people could say it's still not fully conclusive, but it's more evidence than they have in favor of Yahweh, if you ask me. All right. On that note, I think we should close it up, and I'll hand it off to you. And I would say this. This is a very preliminary, even though we dragged on for maybe 2 hours here. This was a very preliminary look at the subject. I hope later on I'm going to get into it when time permits, get into this with Faithful to God, and we're going to try and get into this more. But as I said quite a while ago, I really can't do these videos often. So one place where we can really discuss this in detail, slowly and carefully, is on Vocab Malone's Facebook group, which he'll give you, the Hebrew Israelite and Christian discussion group. And I really invite people who want to discuss that. Let's discuss it there, and let's discuss it slowly and in a correspondence where everything is out clearly. That's all I want to say, and I'll let you close up. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and so people know, Alexandria, that's in Egypt, and there was a community of Jews there. Now, eventually, a lot of them got killed by some Roman armies, but there was a heavy presence there. So just as there also was in some of the other cities there in Egypt. So the point by that is Clement could have had significant exposure to real Hebrew speakers from the much earlier than 1969. I'll just say that. But yeah, man, that's good stuff. There's more to talk about this, and I know there's a lot of technical stuff, but I don't think anything quite like this has quite ever been done. And so we wanted to get into it to show you all the multiple problems and some knowledge of Hebrew along the way. Okay, I see some more comments. Good. Wait, someone had one other. Oh, somebody asked what text that was we were showing. So that was from one of Clement of Alexandria's writings there that Abu was showing in the Greek text, and he was showing how in the Greek the way Clement was trying to write the name of God there, it was in Greek, of course, but would have been equivalent to the Hebrew way to say Yahweh. And Clement lived from 150 to 215. And so, he goes back. This is a very early Christian writer.
Stromata.
Who
Stromata is the name of the text that had that.
How do you spell that? What's the name of the book? Oh, Stromata. Miscellaneous. Oh, okay. So miscellaneous. It was the last work he wrote in his life. Miscellaneous thing, it looks like. Okay. Stromata. So in that, he has that there. I wonder what section that was. That's interesting. Well, okay. Let's close this out, man. Shield Squad in the house. It was great to have Raquel and So Real, aka Lazarus. You know what I'm saying? And Sister Cherry out there. I know everybody's up late, and of course G-Con, my man. And tonight, of course, Abu holding it down, dropping the knowledge, good stuff. Be sure to tune in to Shield Squad Radio. The Shield Sisters got a new episode coming out sometime in the next 3 to 5 days. They'll be dropping a new episode, and you can go to shieldsquad.com for that information, or just go on Blog Talk Radio /Shield Squad. So blogtalkradio.com/Shield Squad, or if you just go on blogtalkradio.com, which a lot of people know because of Debate Talk for You, just look for Shield Squad. You'll be able to find the show there, which you can now subscribe to on iTunes, as well as Stitcher and Tuned In. And we're working on getting it in the Google Play Store. So, of course, you can listen from your laptop, your phone, whatever's the point by that. So please check that out. And again, man, thanks, Abu. It's good times. It'd be interesting if any Hebrew Israelites get back of this and speak to us about it.
And but I want to say the best place is
the Torah Nights.
Your Facebook group is the best place to discuss it because we can have a correspondence. I'm very rarely on these videos just because, unfortunately my devices and my time constraints make it difficult. But I would love to have a correspondence with anyone, a respectful correspondence. I wouldn't disrespect any of these gentlemen. I would love to have a correspondence with them. And your Facebook group, if you can tell them about it, is probably the best place for that.
Yeah. Here, IGIC says, the groups in Israel changed the vowels in the language on purpose. It is the reason the Nikud are not used on Google Translate. They do it to define their groups.
I would say that the Nikudot are not used on Google Translate because they're generally not needed. I mean, like, for example, you pick up an Israeli newspaper in Palestine and what's called Israel, you're going to see there's no dots and lines. They generally don't need it because they know the language. The Nikudot are used in religious texts, to preserve a certain tradition about the pronunciation, and also they're used for children or beginners. But that's why it's not on Google Translate. But whatever. On that note,
I know that's a good point because he's trying to. But the groups in Israel change. I mean, this stuff, a lot of it has sort of been standardized already with the Masoretes first, who are just going back to prior things, and development since then that we can kind of trace and see and track. I mean, it's not like there's a whole bunch of like tinkering with modern Hebrew now, is there, in the way that he would be. It's not like some language in flux. I'm just trying to understand. You know what I'm saying, Abu? Like, I mean, they had a scribal tradition. That's a big deal. Yes. I mean, he's saying I deal with rabbis in Israel. Oh, go ahead.
I'll say this. As we said earlier, I wouldn't claim that the Masoretic text necessarily represents the ancient pronunciation in every single way. As I mentioned, we have ancient transliterations, and we can check the Masoretic text against those ancient transliterations. What I found is most, but not all, of the pronunciations implied by the Masoretic text, the vocalizations implied by the Masoretic text, are corroborated. A great many of them are corroborated by the ancient transliterations that we have, but not all of them are. There are some divergences. What we can get from the Septuagint implies in some places ancient Hebrew may have differed in some respects. But the key point is that, like other Semitic languages, Hebrew had multiple possible vocalizations for every consonant, and that's relevant when we're discussing specifically Lashawan Qadash. On that note, I think I may have to go. It's quite late in New York.
Man. All right, no doubt, man. Hey, God bless, man. It was a great discussion, great all that, man. Abu, thanks for being part of all this, and God bless you, man.
Thank you very much. God bless. Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, no doubt. This guy. Hey, if you guys want to like hear like some of this, is pretty cool, man. There's actually a Christian hip hop group called Hazakim, and they actually use a lot of Hebrew like in their rapping. Now they're English, hip hop group, but they use Hebrew as they rap and stuff, and it's pretty cool the way they do it. This is man here, Abu Kamar out, man here, Abu Kamar out in the East Coast. Shield Squad is definitely in the house. We wanted to go live a little bit earlier. Took a second. Still trying to figure all the technicalities, but here we are, and it's beautiful to be with you. It's still Friday night here in the West Coast where I am in Phoenix. I know some of y'all, it's already the next day. All right, we're going to kick this off. This is the Lashawan Qadash Total Takedown. We're going to get into that One West fake Hebrew, and we're going to show you how Aria led a lot of y'all astray. And like I said, I got my man Abu. Abu, introduce yourself, my man.
Hey, if you can hear me, this is Abu Khamar, a member of Shield Squad, and also just someone who's been interested in the subject of specifically One Westers of the vast Israelite spectrum, that One West stream. And more in particular, I've long been interested in the subject of Lashawan Qadash. They're the distinct form of Hebrew that came out of One West, that came from Aria, and which, as you're going to probably show later in this discussion, is now being used by men who consider themselves hostile to all the One West camps. Now you have these guys who are Tanakh only, and yet they're using Lashawan Qadash as well. And this, I expect to have a fun discussion on this subject. If I can, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to mi hermano Miguelito, porque ha estado esperando pacientemente para discutir este tema. Our brother, faithful to God, has wanted to discuss the subject with me for quite some time. Unfortunately, our schedules keep messing up. I got a lot of, I'm busy with family and busy with work, so our plans kept falling through, but we're going to discuss this soon. So faithful brother, if you're listening to this, we are going to discuss this soon. It just so happened by dumb luck, I was able to do this tonight real quick. My vocab called me up, and we're going to do a short version, and God willing soon. See, okay, we're going to do it fast with, we're going to do a longer version with Faithful one day, God willing. But go ahead.
Man, are you getting any feedback, or does everything sound nice and clear?
Everything sounds nice to me.
All right, good. Abu, what is the background to this language that the One West style Hebrew Israelites use? What's the basic background that you could give people so they understand why it exists?
Well, what you'll see is when people encounter specifically the One Westers, the various splinter groups that broke off from One West, and you encounter them, they'll start talking about Hebrew, and they'll start saying that Paleo Hebrew, that ancient Hebrew, and they'll eventually get around to a dialect, a very modern dialect of Hebrew, even though they swear it's the original form of Hebrew, and they call it Lashawan Qadash. Now that's their dialect's pronunciation of Lashon Kodesh, literally the holy tongue. It's a distinct form of Hebrew that was created by Aria, who was a high priest at the old Israelite Church of Universal Practical Knowledge, Israeli Church of Universal Practical Knowledge, back at 1 West 125th Street. And to be honest, it's essentially modern Israeli Hebrew, just with the pronunciations changed. It's very modern in its concepts of grammar and stuff like that, but it's essentially just it's been reduced to the point where all the characters in Hebrew have only one pronunciation, and it's all basically the ah vocalization on 21 of the 22 Hebrew characters. The only difference being with ayin, they pronounce it I, but everything else is ah. So aleph is just ah, beit is just ba, etc. And so down the line, and we'll see examples of that, I think, hopefully, and we're going to discuss that.
You know who invented it?
The inventor is, by the admission of even some of the old timers, like you'll hear Tahar of GMS, he'll sometimes say, without Aria, without High Priest Aria, we wouldn't have the.
All right, show that was Hazakim.